First, I just want to be, just to let you know that I'm really honored that you're all here, and I'd want to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territories of the Secwepemc people. Our Kamloops campus is located in the lands and on the lands of the Kamloops to Secwepemc, part of the Secwepemc Ulu, a place of deep traditional healing and strength. And in this season of spring renewal, we are reminded that the land's beauty is resilient and generous, and we just want to offer our gratitude for being here today. I'd like to give a heartfelt welcome to all of you. You're community members, some of your students, clinicians, researchers, policymakers, and those who are lived or living experiences related to recovery. And your presence matters. We're really grateful that you chose to spend your time here. I do have a quick few notes that I've been told to share. First of all, if you need to use the bathrooms, they're on the first floor. Got to get that over with. And there's some signs there to guide you. We will have a short break about halfway point, around 4:20. No, is that a joke? Okay, I think it actually does land that way. It wasn't planned. We also have some resource materials. When you first came in, you would have seen a table there, and there is a green sheet there as well for halfway point or afterwards if you want to fill out some questions, or during the middle break, we can try to have some question and answer moments to answer some of your questions. There's also some contact information here as well if you are not comfortable talking today but want us to follow up with you later on. So we definitely want to hear your feedback and follow up if we can. Today's forum is focused on education and awareness of medical cannabis, and we're exploring the role of medical cannabis in recovery. And you may have seen some of our recent stuff on CBC. Did anybody hear it? A little bit? Woo! We're really excited about that. We put a cool poster together up there too, because as soon as we went on CBC, things went crazy, and we got like 12 different media outlets contacting us. So whether it was just for an interview or a little story to piggyback on our work on the radio, so you can have a little look up there. But that was really cool, and it's still growing, and we're really proud about that. And it's been an exciting time. In saying that, again, we're always thinking about why we're here, and that is about the original piece is about the opioid crisis, and it's really touched us in every corner of our lives and in our communities. So through harm reduction, compassionate research, and open dialogue, we hope to build new paths for healing. I do want to put a shout out to a few people here before we jump into this, and that would first of all be a special thanks to Mastermind Studios and Peter Cameron Inglis, he's here. He is recording everything today, so he does ask that you please make sure your phones are turned off. You're so welcome to take pictures or record anything you want, but maybe avoid using a flash, okay? What's really important about this is, yes, we're a small bunch here, but we're not. We're a small and mighty bunch, but we're also going on YouTube with this stuff. So we will be breaking up each presentation into YouTube clips to put out later for anyone to see. And we do have a history of success on that. The last time we did a forum with Peter, we had, one of our YouTube videos had about, what, a million people? A million viewers, yeah, so, wow. So that's sort of, maybe we have a little bit of pressure there to increase that. I don't know. What are we doing? So anyway, I'm just really grateful for his presence. And just as a side note, his daughter is a nursing graduate from TRU, and she's working on a maternity ward right now. So I just had to say that. Sorry, I was just so excited about that. I also want to thank Thompson Rivers University for supporting this event and allowing us to be here. This is often a stigmatized type of dialogue, and some organizations feel sometimes they have to take a bit of risk, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the support that they're giving for me to move this work forward. And I do want to welcome our co-researchers and peers from across BC. We have this amazing relationship. We have some cool synergies between the TRU School of Nursing and the UBC Medicine and Psychology departments. So, and they're here today too, and are working with us together. And it's really truly teamwork, and I appreciate that. So, thank you. Just a quick bit about me, and then I will get on to the important stuff. But I am a nurse of 30 years. I've worked in community health, acute care and neuroscience, maternity and pediatrics, one of my favorite places, and outreach work as a street nurse and up in the community in the Northwest Territories. I am a graduate from the old Caribou College days from here, so 1992, good times, and actually had classes in this theater It was fun back then. I am a settler of European descent, a wife and a mother, and I have two children here that are TRU students as well. So they're carrying on the tradition of knowledge. And I'm just someone who believes in harm reduction and dignity and the power of research to create thriving lives. And I'm just so thankful that I'm surrounded by amazing people. These speakers you'll hear today are an eclectic bunch, and they're very passionate, and I call them my peers and friends. I have a gentleman beside me here who is very special. It is really my pleasure to introduce Michael Koehn. He's a key partner in the journey that we're working on with medical cannabis and all the research and work that we're doing in our communities. And we've hosted 4 forums together. Some of you have been to those forums, and our passion is really growing. And Michael is a recovery counselor here in Kamloops, the director of the medical cannabis clinic called CanSolve, which I have some information up front if you want to connect and ask some questions later. And I would like him to share with us the theme today, because we have a very unique theme. Are you cool with doing that? Okay. Come on over.
Thank you very much, Florriann. What a wonderful human being. I've got to say, what a pleasure to be able to have such wonderful people working on this team. The theme of this event is really near and dear to our hearts. In our work, we work directly with people that are in recovery, who are on their own personal journey. And along the way, we've learned a very important message, and it's a message of hope. And so for our presentation today, our theme is to leave a light on. And our hope for everyone here is that we have the opportunity today to open minds, open hearts, and help to share the most recent and up-to-date evidence on new and really novel ways to approach the overdose crisis. We're blessed to have a panel of living experience experts who are here today, and I'm so grateful, Chris and Dave and Taylor and John and Austin. I'm just so grateful to all of you that you are our scientific peers. You're the individuals who have helped us to see the way forward through a time when we've felt that we have a very limited tool set. All of you fine people have helped us to expand that tool set and to provide new opportunities to people who are struggling, and genuinely a reason to leave a light on. There is hope for us all. So thank you so much for being here today. I very quickly just want to also say happy birthday to Peter Cameron Inglis. He's here on his birthday today. Not only is thank you, Pete. We're not going to sing, it's okay, but I just want to honor the heck out of you because you're an incredible man with an incredible heart who has given to this entire community time and again. I think there's a whole wing of the hospital named after you for all the time that you visited there, and yet you're here today with us, and you've given so much. And so I'm just really grateful to you, my friend, for being here as well. Thank you to our university partners. Thank you to all of our speakers here. All of you are just the absolute best, and I couldn't ask for more wonderful people to take this journey with. So we got a lot to cover. We're going to get right to it, but thank you all for being here today.
He's got like a DJ voice. He should just stay up here. Okay, so each speaker will share about 20 minutes or less of their time, and then we will, at the very end of the event, have time for questions, okay? We have a powerful panel, too, that's coming up, too, closer to the end. So again, we'll just thank you all and for being here, and let's just get started. I'd like to start with our first speaker. You got his masterpiece up there, Dr. Zach Walsh. I'm very proud to introduce my friend and co-researcher lead, Dr. Zach Walsh. He is a clinical psychologist. He's actively working as a clinical psychologist, plus a full professor at UBC who spent many years studying how treatments like medical cannabis can help people heal. And he's not afraid to challenge stigma. In fact, he's kind of like our bodyguard. He's out there for us, pushing new ideas and new ways to support people in recovery. Zach is a lead in Canada. He led the first clinical study trial on cannabis for PTSD, and he's spoken all across the country, even at the Canadian Senate, the House of Commons. His research has been featured in places like New York Times and the Time magazine, but most of all, he stands up for the people behind the research and for those who are often unheard. So I'd just like to please have you welcome someone I'm very grateful to be here, who's my teammate and friend, Dr. Zach Walsh.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. That was like the nicest intro I've ever had. All right, I can see him right there. Good. Hi. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to be talking about this work that's really been, my life's work, a big part of it, and it is so encouraging to be able to come back to TRU. I've been at these at some of the Florriann's events before, Dr. Fehr's events, and it's always just such a beautiful spirit. And I think what's going on in the Maverick is, one of my absolute favorite projects. So anything I can do to come and talk about this stuff, and thank you for being willing to listen. The brief disclosure, I don't have to make the disclosure because more than 5 years ago, no one's been giving me any money recently. But still, I think it's worth saying, I have received money from Tilray and Doja, licensed producers of cannabis. I don't know if they still are, but that was a while ago to do research. I didn't get any personal money from them, but they helped fund the research, and I'm grateful to them for that. It doesn't really impact our discussion here at all. And some of this research has also been funded by some federal agencies, Canadian Institutes of Health Research and SSHRC and others. So just want to recognize that. And what I want, there's such a great program today and a bunch of different talks about different aspects of what's going on in medical cannabis and harm reduction. So I want to give a little bit of a history and maybe touch on a few areas that I think are not going to be as much the main focus. So I think we're going to spend a fair bit of time talking about the terrible drug poisoning crisis that's going on, and particularly the opioids and the potential of cannabis to play a role in recovery, and I just want to maybe touch on some of the things that are maybe adjacent to that. Talking with history, this is the pictographic representation of cannabis. It's supposed to be like the cannabis stalks hanging, and this has been, historically it goes back further than we know, but we'll say at least 3000 BC. So we're talking about 5,000 years of history that cannabis has been. Really, I like to think of it as an ally to humanity, and this stigma that we're talking about is very real still, but we're finally getting out of it. But it's a tiny blip in a 5,000-year history where this has been really a part of the human experience and one of humanity's great allies. And I'm talking about this as medical cannabis, but the way I like to think about it, I think about it almost as like some other species that have been allied with humans, like maybe dogs. You could say, dogs are a nuisance. Dogs smell funny. Sometimes dogs will maybe, hurt a kid if they're not protected and all that. And someone might come along and say, we've got to ban dogs because of this ABC nuisance reason. And then if you were to reintroduce dogs, someone would say, but what? I'm visually impaired. I need a seeing eye dog. And you say, okay, well, you can have a medical dog. And then someone else might say, that's a good reason to have a dog. That person definitely needs it. But also, I'm feeling a little depressed, and it's nice to have a pet that cheers me up. So then we'd say, okay, you could have a dog to help with mental distress as well. And then in time, you might say, well, maybe there's a bunch of reasons why people might want to have dogs, and maybe you can just let them have them and recognize that it can be a bit of a nuisance, but in general, it's something that's really helpful to humanity. It's another species that supports people, and that's just the way I want to invite us to think about cannabis now. Is how do we see this as a potential ally, not without nuisance. Maybe there's nuisance, some funky smell for sure, but really something that is overall an ally and has been for millennia. And when we go back to some of the early mentions of it, go back almost to, like I said, 3000 BC, even into, and it was always considered to be part of the medical knowledge, right? It was seen as a plant medicine. And we start in China, but then we can jump, almost 4,500 years, and we have Queen Victoria. And, cannabis was used as a medicine widely in Victorian times. Even in the court of Queen Victoria, it was known to be a prominent medicine. There's some debate over how much Queen Victoria actually used. I'm not going to wade into that debate right now, but I do think that it is cool that, as much as British Columbia is maybe not the best name for this place, our capital city is named after a strong female cannabis user. So now taking us right up to the current time, and I'm going to drop us right in the middle of the Dark Ages, the war on drugs, 1988. Picture me in high school, beautiful, flowing hair. And we were right in the middle of the war on drugs then. And even then, at that time, when cannabis activists took the DEA, so the Drug Enforcement Agency of the U.S., in the middle of the drug war, the cannabis activists took them to court to say this should be recognized as a medicine, not as exclusively as a drug of abuse. And even then, at the height of the drug war, the U.S. DEA said cannabis is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. Doesn't mean it has no harms, it's one of the safest therapeutically active substances. So you don't have to take it from me, take it from the DEA. Because, you might think, oh, this guy's a cannabis advocate. No, this is coming from the other side of things. So that's a little bit of the history that I want to take us to, right? And so around that time, we started to see more and more people rediscovering and re-advocating for cannabis as a medicine. And so there's just a couple, I think they're common sense premises that I hope can guide us a little bit today and also guide the rest of my presentation. The first is that substituting a less harmful substance in place of a more harmful substance is harm reduction. First of all, we can, just in the name harm reduction, like reducing harms, how can you be against that? And I think when you take something that is less harmful, like cannabis, and replace it for something that's potentially more harmful, that's a win. It's not like we're just piling cannabis on top of other medicines. In many cases, it can reduce the use of other medicines. So we can control symptoms. What are the options? The options are you leave symptoms untreated and people suffer, or you treat them with something, and if you're going to treat them with something, you want something that has the least negative effects. So substituting cannabis for many of our medications, I think, can be a win. And even if it's on the edge, I think the second point, options and choice, are keys to patient-centered care. So I'm not saying that you have to use cannabis for a variety of disorders that we might talk about today, but shouldn't you be allowed to have that choice? If the effectiveness is on par and if the harms are very reasonable and in some cases less. So that leads us to some of our research that I want to talk about today. These are a couple of papers that we did a little bit over 10 years ago. And at the time, they were the largest studies. I think they might still be the largest studies of medical cannabis users in Canada. And what they found, probably not surprising to many people in this room, is that people use cannabis for a number of symptoms. And there's three that really stick out that I want to talk about today that I think are really relevant. Sleep, pain, and anxiety. And these are things that trouble so many of us, right? These aren't obscure symptoms. These are major symptoms that characterize so much ill health. And, when you think about what are the options, you could leave your sleep untreated, you could leave the anxiety untreated, but if you're going to treat them, what is the frontline treatment in a place where cannabis is not available? Usually it's benzodiazepines and things like Valium or Ativan, lorazepam, a bunch of different names for them. But if you're going to take those, you got to think, what is the pros and cons of that versus cannabis? And what's the role of stigma? Because when you look at the research, and I think there's a good role, I'm not saying we need to criminalize benzodiazepines, certainly not. But if you think about benzos, there's all kinds of evidence suggesting that they can lead to dementia, right? There's much stronger evidence around the harms of benzos and much stronger evidence around addiction to benzos than there is to cannabis. Yet these are some of the most widely prescribed medications out there because things like sleep and anxiety trouble a lot of people. So even if we just have another option for sleep and anxiety and also pain, I think that's huge. That's a huge win. And we need to think about cannabis as a potential substitute for benzodiazepines. And I'll talk about that for a moment. But I also want to talk about the most widely used substance, maybe next to caffeine, which cannabis is not a great substitute for, let's be serious. But alcohol, right? And I want to also pay tribute to one of the real forefathers of this renaissance of cannabis substitution research, Todd McCurria. So we're going now to 2004, and this is the first scientific paper suggesting that cannabis could be a substitute and as harm reduction. So I always want to give credit to Dr. Todd. And then I want to move on to what our own findings are. So we started asking people, are you using cannabis? We saw that people are using cannabis for things like pain and sleep and anxiety. And we thought, what? We should ask people if they're using cannabis instead of these drugs. And lo and behold, that's what we found. So when we looked at this survey of medical cannabis users, you see regardless of what their main use of cannabis was for, some Some have it for pain, others are for mood and anxiety. A lot of people with side effects of HIV/AIDS medications, gastrointestinal stuff. But across the board, people are using cannabis to substitute for alcohol, illicit drugs, and prescription drugs. So it's not being used on top of, it's being used instead of. And in many cases, that can be harm reduction. We asked another broader sample, and we found the same thing. And this is all about 10 years ago when this was becoming, more new. And you see over a third or around a third of respondents are saying, yeah, they're using cannabis as a substitute. And in many cases, they're using it for more than one reason. So they're using it as a substitute. If you look at the folks with mental health conditions and with pain, they're using it for benzodiazepines and for opioids. So because of the pain relieving features, it can be a substitute for a couple drugs. And particularly in our current crisis, the mixture of benzodiazepines and opioids is so deadly. So if we can get something that can substitute for both of those with a modest side effect profile, that's a big win. And we started to see it as something that can reduce costs too. In the US, when they started having medical cannabis regulations, they saw that people were, prescriptions of those drugs fell. So it's not just the people are saying they're doing it, they're actually seeing reductions in sales. And more recently, we've started to see research focused on benzodiazepine substitution, and you can see that for people with chronic pain, anxiety, sleep disorders, 72% decreased use of benzodiazepines. And in a different study, a slightly smaller one, but still over 100 people, almost half reduced their use of benzodiazepines. So benzodiazepines, one of the most widely prescribed drugs, have a lot of problems associated with them, and this is a great potential substitute. I also work with a lot of young adults. When I'm at UBC, it's a very safe and lovely campus, but when we do have problems, behavior problems or fights or anything that happens there, it's almost always related to alcohol. We have a bar on campus, which is, I guess customary, but also surprising. Why are we selling alcohol on campus? And if we are going to sell alcohol on campus, why aren't we selling cannabis? Why are people who want to go and socialize and catch a buzz, which is not unusual for young adults or old adults or adults, why are they forced into alcohol and not given a cannabis option? And what we see is that, young people, you gotta always trust the youth. The youth are much smarter than us. And they're already starting to substitute alcohol for cannabis. We're seeing an increase in cannabis use and a decrease in alcohol use. And according to the Georgia Straight, it's hurting the bar scene, live music venues, but maybe we'll see a place where these venues can start to sell cannabis, because right now they can't. They can only sell alcohol. So we've got to start looking at these societal prejudices that steer people towards alcohol, and I don't need to go on about the risks of alcohol. They're substantial, far worse than the risks of cannabis. And, we need to get the health authorities to rethink some of their advice here. This is not so old. This is from 2019, where it says, do not combine cannabis with other high-risk behaviors, such as consuming alcohol or other drugs. Yet, what we see in our surveys of students is that only when they use cannabis and alcohol together, I don't want to scandalize anyone, but some young people will use both cannabis and alcohol. And when they do, only 4% reported that cannabis made them drink more, whereas 56% reported that they drink less. And drinking less is a big piece of harm reduction. Most of the bad things that happen from alcohol to young adults, not the long-term effects on organ damage, but the accidents, the regrettable behaviors, all of that stuff, usually tends to happen after about 5 or 6 drinks. So if we can reduce the speed and density of people's alcohol consumption, that's a big harm reduction win. And it seems to be that's the way cannabis works. And even 1 in 10 of them, and this is a few years ago, it might be higher now, are using cannabis purposely to reduce their use of alcohol. In a follow-up study by one of my students, Joey Rootman, we looked at using people's smartphones to check in with them when they were going out and having a few drinks, or on the weekend, or partying, or whatever, however you want to describe it. What were they doing? And we found out that for these folks, cannabis use actually led to fewer drinks consumed. So if people were using cannabis before or during their alcohol use, they drank 17% fewer drinks. Difference between 5 and 4 drinks or 10 and 8 drinks. And that may not seem like a lot, but what we see is after 5 or 6 drinks, the harms go right up. So each drink after that is a big risk, and cannabis perhaps reduces those risks. And we've had subsequent research to show that some of the harmful behaviors are reduced when people are using cannabis. So also rethinking this idea, if you're going to drink as much as you would anyways and just pile cannabis on top of it, yeah, that's probably not the best. But if cannabis makes you consume less alcohol, it could also be a form of harm reduction. And you might say, oh, great, well, you're going to have young people, you know, based on cannabis stigma that are incapacitated because they're using cannabis all the time. But what this study, this is coming from JAMA Psychiatry, one of the most conservative and reputable scientific journals out there. And what they showed on this huge review is that after that there's very modest acute effects after the cannabis wears off, and that after 72 hours, people seem entirely back to baseline, even if they're very heavy cannabis users. So it seems like there's not the kind of long-term impairment that we had so long feared. So I think this is, you know, taken together, it's an argument for harm reduction. And I also just want to touch on one other thing, which, you know, so many people, and as Dr. Fehr said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I run the problematic substance use clinic. So I've spent my life treating people who struggle with substance use problems. So it's not like it's something that I'm glib about or take lightly. And I know that so many people who really struggle also have post-traumatic stress disorder. If people are really struggling with substance use, there's also some other stuff often going on. And cannabis has been demonstrated to really be helpful for some folks with PTSD. What we see in this first study from just a few years ago, that if people were using cannabis when they went into treatment for PTSD, it didn't matter one way or the other. But when people were combining it with CBT, it seemed to help reduce PTSD symptoms. In another study that perhaps Dr. Milloy might touch on in a moment, so I won't get into too much detail, but we found that people who were using cannabis and had PTSD had lower rates of suicidal ideation and suicidality and depression. So even if it doesn't cure the PTSD, sometimes it can make life more tolerable and reduce depression and suicide in people who struggle with PTSD. Finally, just to close, cannabis is not necessarily a cure for PTSD, but it can reduce the symptoms. And this is, I think, the best and most comprehensive study of cannabis and PTSD. And what we found was that most of the time when people used cannabis, it reduced acute symptoms. The PTSD didn't go away, but right after using cannabis, the symptoms of intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, irritability, and anxiety would be reduced. And we know from working in treatment that getting some of those symptoms under control can be such an important step in a more fulsome recovery. So I think cannabis has tremendous potential for harm reduction across the spectrum of people who struggle with substance use. And you'll hear more about the opioid crisis coming up, but I just also wanted to touch a little bit on benzodiazepines and alcohol and on young adults and some other areas where cannabis can be an effective mode of harm reduction. And I just want to thank you all so much for your attention. Never hesitate to reach out to me. I'm easy to find. If you just Google Zach Walsh Cannabis, you'll find me if you don't take this number down. But if you do, I'm always happy to hear an email from anyone. And thanks to all my tremendous students, some of whom are here today, who have helped me with this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walsh. All right. Well, we're getting the next presentation up. I would like to now, it is my honor to introduce another powerhouse researcher, someone who usually works behind the scenes and whose impact is impossible to miss. Dr. M.J. Milloy, where are you? You're hiding somewhere? Come on down. Here he is. He's a brilliant epidemiologist, a research scientist at the BC Centre of Substance Use and UBC's first ever Canopy Growth Professor of Cannabis Science. I got to hear more about that. He leads critical research in Vancouver's down south east side. That's a lot of work. He's investigating how cannabis can support people who are most at risk for overdose. MJ has been a relentless advocate for change, combining heart, science, and action with over 350 peer-reviewed publications. How the heck do you have time to do that? You cloned yourself, okay. He brings a rare depth of expertise, and he has a great sense of humor too. And he's part of our Maverick team, which you'll hear about in a little bit. But we're just so lucky to have him. He drove up here, and we're just, yeah, thank you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. M.J. Milloy.
Thank you very much. And, oh, I'm a little taller. Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for this fantastic event. Not only this. And thank you, Dr. Fehr, for the wonderful and partially accurate introduction. I will do my best to try and live up to those kind words. It's a real pleasure to be here today, not only because it was a great drive and it's a wonderful place to spend some time, but just to be among folks who are so compassionate, who are attacking this problem with an open heart and trying to leave a light on. And I think in these times, that sort of hope and that sort of action is something we all need to get behind. So I'm very thrilled to be here and to try and share what we've been learning in Vancouver at the BC Centre on Substance Use, where I work, and what we've been learning from the folks who are living and dying through this overdose crisis. And it's a tremendous honor and privilege to be able to bring those stories to you in the hopes that we might learn from them and we might chart a better path forward for all of us. So let me get right to things, because Michael has threatened me with physical violence if I don't stick to 20 minutes. So I will get on to it. But before I do, I want to share with you my disclosures. It's funny, I'm a much more mediocre researcher than Dr. Walsh, and yet I have a lot more disclosures. I'm really not sure why that is. Long story short, the research I'm going to show to you today has been produced with funding from the U.S. federal government through the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And the job that I hold, the Canopy Growth Professorship, which is a very strange thing to have, was established through gifts to the university from Canopy Growth and the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, with a mandate to investigate this idea. What role cannabis might play in the overdose crisis. But rest assured, like Zach, those folks do not tell me what to do or how to research or what the conclusions I draw. And like all UBC faculty, I have a responsibility to conduct ethical research in the public interest, and that's what I'm trying to do. If you look closely, you'll see that I've been produced, in a sense, by Donald Trump and the world's largest producer of legal weed, which certainly 16-year-old MJ would never have believed or really understood. So here we are. Before I go any further, though, I want to also really acknowledge that the work I do is on the unceded traditional and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish, and I'm very grateful to them and to all Indigenous groups across Turtle Island for their stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. Right, get down to it. The drug overdose crisis. It is, by any definition, a unprecedented, tragic, uncontrolled, ongoing public health catastrophe. We have lost far too many of our fellow citizens, our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones, to a completely preventable cause. I read the other day that drug overdose is now the leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 19 in this province. And that should shame all of us involved in the response to this crisis, from Mr. Eby on down, hell, from Mr. Carney on down. And so, starting off, I want to challenge us to think about the crisis a little bit differently. Not as a crisis caused by fentanyl and people who use drugs, although that is the proximate cause. But as Zach sort of hinted, let's think of this crisis as what has been produced by failure. The failure of the war on drugs, the failure often of our healthcare systems, despite lots of good effort to provide care for folks living with addictions and pain and trauma and all of the symptoms of life. And also, of course, in a time of abundance, so many of our neighbors are living without good jobs, without decent homes. And what you get through all of those failures is the overdose crisis. We're lucky here in BC in the sense that in 2016, of course, the provincial government declared a public health emergency and has subsequently done some good work scaling up some evidence-based approaches to address that crisis. However, we've lost 16,000 folks since the beginning of the crisis, and it is a crisis that spans all corners of the province. Unfortunately, these are the numbers for Kamloops. These are the rates compared to BC, and so you'll see that there are higher rates generally here in Kamloops of death from overdose than in the rest of BC. I'm very aware that, out there in the audience, you'll probably see friends and neighbors and loved ones in that orange line. And I think that's a shame and a tragedy. And so I'm going to dedicate my talk to those folks that we've lost from here in Kamloops. I'm an epidemiologist, and so the way I work is not thinking about sort of individual deaths, because they're all unique and they're all tragic, but rather thinking about deaths on a population level. And what can we learn from these overdose deaths to understand why they happened, and more importantly, to figure out ways to prevent similar deaths in the future. And over about 20 or 30 years of research, scientists like myself have come up with some risk factors that we know, with everything else being equal, really increase the risk of death for folks from a fatal overdose. And some of it's behaviors. If you use fentanyl, if you use it alone, if you use it in public, that's a big risk for death. If you are living with a substance use disorder, that's often another risk factor for this. But oftentimes, it often is circumstances. If you're leaving a correctional facility, if you're disengaging from treatment, these are also periods when the risk of death is much higher. Now, as I said, we're lucky here in BC that the government has done some good work in bringing the sorts of evidence-based approaches to prevent these deaths from happening. This was a study I did with Bonnie Henry, which is crazy, back in 2018 or so. And we tried to estimate how many of these evidence-based approaches averted deaths. How many deaths were averted in the early days of the crisis? Methadone, overdose prevention sites, and distributing naloxone. These are all really good ways of preventing deaths on a population level. I'm going to try and use this laser thing, so careful. Is it working? No, I'm just an old man and I'm totally incapable. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So these are the deaths here that were averted. Well, what I want to talk about today is the deaths that happened. So even while we have good services to prevent overdose deaths, we're still losing far too many people to a preventable cause. And that's where cannabis comes in. In 2016, at the BC Centre on Substance Use, some of us saw this preliminary data that I'll show and got really interested in this idea. Maybe cannabis might play a beneficial role in the overdose crisis. And one of those pieces of evidence, as Dr. Walsh suggested, was from the United States, comparing states that had a medical or recreational cannabis system to states that didn't. And lo and behold, what did we find? States with medical cannabis, less opioid prescriptions, less opioid doses or dispensations, less hospitalizations resulting from opioids, and less opioid-related mortality. 25% lower rates of opioid death, overdose, in states with a medical cannabis system. Now, this is not conclusive evidence, but it certainly excited us back in 2016, and it led us to really think carefully about how we wanted to investigate this issue. We're very lucky at the BCCSU to have some very large studies of folks who use drugs, and so we can learn very quickly and very effectively from them about the causes of drug consequences and what we might do to prevent them. So what we started to do was really ask questions of our participants, folks who use drugs, people who use drugs, about how they use cannabis, how they think we could integrate cannabis into treatment settings, how we could change the rules around cannabis and substance use to increase its possible benefits. So what I'm going to do now is show you some of that research and show you what we've learned from those studies. And they come from 3 studies, which include 3,000 people that we interview every 6 months. These are folks who are at highest risk of overdose. They're using drugs often in very risky ways. They're injecting drugs. They're using drugs in public. They're using fentanyl every day. And from these studies, we've really learned important things about the benefits of overdose prevention, the benefits of methadone, and the important roles that pain and trauma, stigma, play in generating the harms that many of these people experience. So what did we learn about cannabis? The first thing is, no surprise, lots of folks at high risk of overdose are using cannabis. We estimate in our studies in the downtown east side about 2/3 of folks use it at least once every 6 months, and a lot of those folks are using it every day, often smoking joints. And why are they using it? Well, as Dr. Walsh has already showed, a lot of folks are using it for therapeutic reasons. While intoxication is still the most common reason people tell us they're using cannabis, we've also seen that 3/4 of cannabis users have at least one therapeutic reason. And as Zach said, they're dealing with pain. They're trying to improve their sleep. They're addressing mental health concerns like depression and anxiety, for which there really aren't very good treatments, like benzodiazepines. And really exciting, we also found that they're using it for harm reduction. Some folks are intentionally using cannabis instead of the risky toxic substances from the drug supply. Not only for opioids, but also for stimulants and methamphetamine, which is really exciting because while we have some medications for folks who have opioid addiction, we don't have similar medications for folks who are living with a stimulant use disorder. And we found that many of them told us what an important role cannabis played in their life. This was a great quote from a younger drug user who used to be homeless, who told us, pot is major harm reduction for me. I come home from work, I buy the things I need for my place, I get high and enjoy the high for 3 or 4 hours, and then I go to sleep, you know? It actually works. It keeps me away from the crack. And that idea that people are using cannabis to deal with their crack use, to try and cut down on their crack use, addicted or not, is such a powerful thing and has really inspired a lot of us to try and figure out ways so that we can support these behaviors and help people survive the overdose crisis. Lo and behold, later on, we did a similar study, and we looked at individuals who were using using cannabis to address those cravings for stimulants. And we found if they did that, that preceded declines in stimulant use. And that's not a conclusive finding, but it does suggest there are folks who are successfully using cannabis instead of crack cocaine. Similarly, we found folks who were using cannabis, periods of cannabis use, were associated with lower rates of injecting drugs. And we all know, of course, about the gateway hypothesis. What we seemed to find was the reverse. Among younger drug users who had yet to start injecting drugs, if they were using cannabis every day, their rates of initiation of injection were far lower. So instead of cannabis inexorably leading to young people using heroin, when that's what the friendly Mountie in grade 8 gym class told me was going to happen if I used weed, little did he know I was a Grateful Dead fan. Instead of that, what we found was the reverse, that it seemed to be protecting individuals from moving from non-injection to injection, which is a tremendous step up in terms of the risk of not only overdose, but also acquisition of HIV and hepatitis C. We also found that pain plays an important role in these people's lives, and that some of the benefits of cannabis might be by serving as an alternate analgesic instead of the opioids of heroin and fentanyl in the drug supply. When we looked at the records from over 1,200 folks in our studies who were living with chronic pain, if they told us that they were using cannabis every day, they were far less likely to tell us that they were using opioids every day. Again, maybe evidence that they are substituting. And this is really exciting for the clinicians in the audience. You know, there's a lot of concern around cannabis interfering with methadone, interfering with drug treatment. But again, what we found was the reverse. When we looked at the records of our participants starting methadone, we found that those who were using cannabis every day when they started their methadone were far more likely to stay on methadone, which is a good thing, and they were far less likely to have evidence of fentanyl in their urine, which suggests that the treatment was working. This has really led us to suggest that cannabis might be a good adjunct for folks in methadone to make methadone work better. And this is the last big thing I want to show, and I'm showing it because it's not published yet, but it's probably the largest study of medical cannabis use in Canada ever conducted, involving almost 4,000 individuals and almost 40,000 interviews from 2005 until now. So all eras of the overdose crisis, before fentanyl and after fentanyl. I know there's a lot of numbers up there, and I don't want people to get bogged down in these terrible details, but I want to focus on this bit right here. So what we did is each of these lines is a different statistical analysis. And we paired different measurements of cannabis use. Folks are using cannabis every day. Folks have cannabis in their urine. And then these are the risk factors for opioid overdose. Having a non-fatal overdose, using opioids every day, having fentanyl in your urine. And long story short, what we found is in every one of these models, cannabis predicted lower risks of overdose death. And in fact, for the first time, we're seeing that cannabis use, both daily cannabis use and having cannabis THC in your urine, predicts lower risks of having a non-fatal overdose. Having a non-fatal overdose is one of the most potent risk factors for going on to have a fatal overdose. And for those of folks who have survived one, they know that it can often lead to brain impairment, behavioral issues, and it's a very serious medical event in and of itself. So I think this is very exciting work that we're hoping to publish soon and move forward. The last thing I want to say that we've learned is that access to cannabis, medical, legal cannabis in this group, in this population, is very poor. Legal cannabis has really yet to come to the downtown east side. It's more expensive than non-legal cannabis. You have to jump through a lot more hoops to get it. And if you're a homeless person using drugs on the street, you probably don't have a credit card and a mailing address to get medical cannabis sent to your address. So this is another really important point I want to make, is that not only is medical cannabis beneficial, but we also have to figure out ways to deliver it to people where they are, where they're at. And that's why I'm so excited to be a part of the Maverick program, to figure out ways where we can engage folks on their recovery journey with legal, safe, dependable, dosed cannabis. So before I conclude, and I'm wrapping up because Michael's getting the big hook, I want to just make two really important points about the limitations of this work. You've probably heard that saying that it's not correlation, it's correlation, not causation. I hate that statement for various reasons, but it is true here. We can't conclude from what I've shown you that there's a cause and effect relationship here. Maybe there is, but we can't exclude the possibility that other things are going on. To do that, we need to have a clinical trial, and that's one of the things we're working on. The other is that we're really not sure how this is working. And so that's why I'm always really excited to learn from folks on their recovery journey, to learn how they're using cannabis and what role it's playing in that journey. Because that's such an important missing piece of the work that we're doing, is figuring out how to do it. Because that means when we figure out how it's done, we can take it to other people and we can help them in their journeys towards lower overdose risk. And, we have some suspicions. We know that there are folks who are intentionally using cannabis to substitute for other more risky substances, classic harm reduction, as Dr. Walsh has suggested. We know that pain is an important thing, and not only physical pain, chronic pain, but psychological pain. 90% of the folks in our studies have had some traumatic experience as a child. Physical abuse, physical neglect, sexual abuse. 90%. So it's really no surprise that they are living lives so challenging now. And I want to also have a quote from, I think, a fellow we're going to hear from in a bit from the Maverick program. And he said, talking about his cannabis use, it's to create that stability and recovery, it was a complete game changer, talking about what cannabis meant for him on the CBC. And for me, that was such an eloquent way of talking about it. And it really, for me, opened up this idea that maybe that's what it's about, right? Maybe that's why folks on methadone do better when they're using cannabis, because the cannabis provides that stability, so that the methadone can do its work, and so that the individual can do their work, rebuilding social contacts, getting a job, getting a decent place to live, all the really crucial parts of recovery past the clinical interventions. So what next? Well, I'm really excited to say we're doing a clinical trial after much effort, as Dr. Walsh and any clinician involved in that sort of research will tell you. It's the first time, we think, that legal THC has been administered as a possible treatment for addiction. So we're very excited by that. We're doing it at the St. Paul's among volunteers who are on methadone. And in a sort of a medium term, we want to establish a service in the downtown east side, not only for folks who are living with addiction, but everyone who is using cannabis for harm reduction. It is unacceptable to me that we have warehouses across this country with hundreds of thousands of kilograms of unsold cannabis, and yet there are people out in the downtown east side right now using fentanyl because it's easier and cheaper to get a hold of. That's wrong. That's what we need to change. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be working with these folks who are trying to figure out how to bring the promise of legal cannabis, legal medical cannabis, to more people. So I want to conclude just by saying, well, thank you, first of all, for the time that we're spending together. The studies, I'm really happy to share the studies with you, and I hope you've gained something from that. We're still learning. We're still investigating. We have a pretty good sense, though, that at least for some folks at highest risk of overdose, cannabis is an important life-saving intervention. And even though we're going to need to continue the work to prove things to a medical or clinical certainty, we have the evidence we need right now to engage more folks in medical cannabis, especially the folks who are already using it right now, because the promise is there and certainly the need is now. And so I'm very thrilled to be here to share this information and to be with you all when we learn more from the Maverick as we move towards a future without an overdose. And that's certainly what we're working for and what we all hope to see. So thank you very much. My email's there. Please bother me if you like. One thing, if you want any of the copies of any of the studies that I've referred to, more than happy to send you a free PDF if you just bother me. And certainly we'll have questions. And thank you again. That wasn't too long. Great. Yes.
You weren't going to bring the hook out, were you? You did great, MJ. Thank you. Okay. Glasses. Here we go. And now, I like to call this person a local hero. We're so lucky to have Dr. Mitchell, Ian Mitchell. He is a beloved emergency physician right here in Kamloops. He's always raising his voice for others. Some of you might even know him from his viral video. He is the one that had over 1 million views from our previous forum. And yeah, so I guess that means you're officially a rock star in my books. Dr. Mitchell is a clinical associate professor at UBC's Department of Emergency Medicine, a co-investigator in groundbreaking psilocybin research for major depression, and has a great background in pharmacology. Throughout his career, he stayed close to the world of toxicology, leading projects focused on naloxone, cannabis, ketamine, and psilocybin. He's a natural educator and a mentor, always approachable, always passionate. He's come to a few of my forums and talks and classes, and I really appreciate him. And I personally learn something new from him every single time I hear him speak. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Ian Mitchell. Here's your clicker.
Thank you so much. I think that's quite the introduction there. So yeah, I'm Ian Mitchell with a name like Mitchell from Northern Ireland. You know that I'm a Protestant originally from Scotland, and so the Mitchells would be part of the Protestant invasion that colonized Northern Ireland for 200 years, and then we immigrated to Canada. So carrying on a colonial tradition, which is kind of part of being British. But my family is also a family of healers. My father was a surgeon. His father was a family doctor. Before him was a pharmacist. My mother and wife are both nurses, and my teenage children are both seeking their own healthcare journey. And I've been very happy to have come here. Willing or not, I guess I had not much choice in the matter, but grateful to grow up and now work in this lovely area, originally of Secwepemc area. So this talk is really focused mostly on marketing versus evidence-based medicine. And when I was doing my bachelor's degree, came to third year, time to pick a major, and I was hoping to do physiology, but my grades weren't good enough. So there's a group next door that said, well, you know, why don't you go off and maybe study pharmacology? And I said, well, what's that? And they said, well, that's the study of how drugs affect animals and people. And I'm like, you can do that? And I was sold. And so I've been studying drugs for the last 40 years, and this is kind of a bit of a distillation of kind of knowledge and the way I would look at it walking through the B.C. cannabis store. So hopefully just a little guide to some of the things you find there, and some of the evidence behind some of these sales. So when we talk about the B.C. cannabis store is a recreational store. It does not provide medical information. It's not supposed to sell medical product. That's for the medical cannabis field. Although the medical cannabis field is kind of shrinking a lot over the last few years. Among other reasons, there's very few doctors around, so if it's harder to find a doctor, you can't get an authorization. And obviously, in a recreational world, THC really drives sales. And you know, we have pretty good evidence that THC helps with pain and helps with sleep, although honestly not great evidence, moderate, I would say. But these stores, they also sell CBD, CBN, CBG, and THCV. And those we generally think of as non-intoxicating, not psychoactive necessarily chemicals, So, you know, how does that fit into recreation, and how are they sold? On what basis are they sold? Are they, you know, what's the fun you get out of them? What's the motto? So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about what we see there and some of the evidence behind all these things. So first off, when you walk through the store, you're going to see different sections. Okay, you're going to see indica versus sativa versus hybrid. And, you know, B.C. cannabis store kind of says, well, generally indica, it's the one that puts you into couch, higher in THC, and also contains CBD. And that's just not true, certainly in the way things are currently. And there's a bit of a backstory behind that. In the 70s, people were looking for a strain to breed with current strains available in North America, or predominantly grown in Mexico, and were not very cold tolerant. So people went over to Afghanistan, sowed seeds into the seams of their clothing, flew back and started to grow indica seeds, which at that time probably did have higher levels of CBD. But currently, there's been so much interbreeding between all these. Study after study has shown that there's no real chemical difference between plants that come from these two varieties, no matter how they're assigned. And there's been breeds, strains that have won the best indica one year and won the best sativa a different year. And no one's really been able to provide a mechanism for how this would happen. You know, what is it about the current sativa versus indica plants that makes them different? Certainly the CBD, THC are equivalent. So then you break it down, well, maybe it's the terpenes. And this has been one of the thoughts for a while, that maybe it was a terpene called myrcene that was responsible for making people sleepy. But myrcene's in mangoes, it's in lemongrass, and those aren't things that are, you know, really known for knocking you out. And people are very much generally attuned to things that make you sleepy. You know, there's lots of things like kava and all kinds of things around the world that people are like, wow, this makes you sleepy, great. So this is really historical interest alone. So none of this should be paid any attention to. There's no studies that support this as far as these two different plants having different effects on people. We'd love to do that research in a proper way. So far, it hasn't been done. So the next thing I want to talk about is CBD. And CBD, that's $2.99. That's $2.99 for 100 milligrams. Well, a pretty good price overall. Generally, CBD is more expensive than THC because it takes more plant matter to make it. It's just hard to extract, so it costs quite a bit more. And that's one of the issues with CBD, is it does tend to cost a lot more. So what does it do, though? You know, what does CBD do according to the scientific literature? We do know that it's great for seizures, and that was one of the things you didn't really need the scientific evidence for, because there were these kids that were born with a seizure disorder, generally Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, very difficult to control, you know, dozens of seizures a day. And then there was this extract called Charlotte's Web that people started using, and it would stop those seizures. And, you know, you don't really need a study. That's evidence right on fast that this works. And subsequent studies confirm this. And now you can buy CBD in a pharmacologically pure preparation. You can buy it in kind of tablets, capsules, whatever, and take. So that is, you know, unquestionably valid science that backs up that activity. But most people buying CBD from the store, they're not taking it for stopping seizures. They're taking it for relaxation. And there's some animal studies that have looked at that and shown that generally it does seem to reduce anxiety somewhat in animals. But the human studies have just not been able to replicate that. And there's studies where that people are being given 150, 300, 600 milligrams. Big doses that most people are not taking anywhere close to. And they're not really finding good evidence of anti-anxiety. There's lots of animal evidence looking at anti-inflammatory effect, but very poor in people. People say, well, how much would I take for arthritis? And I said, well, the only thing I have to go on dosage is, in a dog study, they use 2 milligrams per kilo. But, I don't know what it would be in people. We don't have those studies. There's lots of basic research. So that's kind of what I call the dosage dilemma, all these studies. So, there's studies where, okay, you should take CBD before going out in public speaking, okay? But that study, 600 milligrams of CBD, and that's 2 of those big gummies there, right? So how much more do you eat? And you're going to take that all the time? That's a lot. Plus, when you get up that dosage, there can be some actual liver issues. So generally, that whole thing isn't clear. Another thing that was long thought of and backed up by earlier research was about CBD decreasing the high from THC. And earlier research did support this, but subsequent research has been a lot iffier and really not demonstrated the same thing. And one of the things they've done several studies looking at driving ability, and really CBD given in conjunction with THC doesn't seem to affect the impairment. You're still impaired. So that's a very kind of direct look at something that didn't show a positive effect, and it doesn't mean that there aren't more subjective effects that are present. But we haven't really teased that out with any good research. Next in the line is CBN. And CBN, again, the cannabis store, they're not supposed to market medical, but you go look at CBN products and it's, bedtime blueberry, drowsy diamonds. It's all very kind of, the names are definitely suggestive that this will make you sleepy. And this came on the market 2021, 2022, allegedly based on a study out of Australia, but the study actually gave CBN in combination with generally a dose of 10 to 20 milligrams of THC at night. So not just testing CBN, and that's one of the issues with some of the research is they test different formulations which have a multiple cannabinoids, and you're not sure which one is actually producing the effect. So CBN overall, in rats does seem to cause some sedation, but in people, there was one particularly good study, the claim is of sleep improvement. This is one of the studies that was done, and one of the better ones done from last year. And this is really what we want to see. We want to see a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study where people don't know if they're getting the active ingredient or a placebo. And the investigators don't know either, so that's the best way to test. And that's typically how we test drugs in general. And when you do a study like this, you really identify one outcome that you're looking for. And in this study, it was sleep quality. And then you have a bunch of other things. Well, did they wake up as much? Did they toss and turn? What were other factors involved? On the primary outcome for this study, it did not show any improvement. So we would call that a negative study, and that's still one of the best ones that's been done. Now, they did show some small improvement in some other areas, and other areas that didn't show improvement. So, it's possible there's an effect, but we're trying to show a strong effect here, and it's just not showing up. The next one is CBG, and CBG I think people know maybe the least about. It's just kind of not been around very much. They think it may have effects on metabolism and anxiety. And in one study, I think the one study we have is 34 people taking 20 milligrams of CBG. And again, some improvement in anxiety, but not in other parts of mood. So again, varying results from this. And that's kind of the sum total of human research on effect that I'm able to find. So, that kind of comes out to, well, you can try it. It might work and it might not, which that doesn't seem like the standard to which we should have here. Especially for a drug. And when you look at the, kind of some of the research, this is what they'll say. These are all the things that it does. It's neuroprotective, it's anti-inflammatory, it's antihypertensive, it causes metabolic, this is what the cannabinoid system regulates, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this drug does those things. And then THCV, it's kind of a newcomer as well. You can get those, this is a THCV and THC chew. So again, you're not just getting the THC effect, you're getting both of them. And what does that do? There's one study where they used a combination formulation of THCV and CBD to grow hair. And actually did as well as minoxidil, Rogaine. So, but I haven't seen that on the market yet. And certainly I don't know what I want to ground up the gummies and rub in my hair. That seems a bit much there. But again, there's certainly potential out there. And when you look at how successful Rogaine has been, and if you've got a study saying, well, THCV can do as well and grow hair, well, how come we aren't seeing bigger studies being done? How come this isn't, you know, the new big marketing thing? So THC, overall weight loss, neuroprotection is a thing, but really there's very little human research. Interestingly, there's a product marketed in America called High Be Gone, which is a THCV concentrate. And you're supposed to be able to take this and it will take away your high. So if you've had too much, whatever, you can take some THCV and that'll just be great. And that's, you know, that's maybe kind of a thing that could happen. Apparently THCV is an antagonist, so it will kick THC off the receptors. But the research is pretty spotty, and there's one study that looked at the effects of this, and kind of some people said it helped, and some people said it really didn't. So again, certainly not a guarantee, and probably not something that's quite ready for prime time. I think you also want to be respectful of THC antagonists, because there was a medication called rimonabant, and that was being researched for appetite control, because if you get the munchies and you block those THC receptors, that should involve you eating less food. Unfortunately, people kind of like some of their natural THC molecules, and that drug made people kind of anxious and depressed and suicidal, so that's kind of gone off the market. So that's kind of what you can buy generally in the store. And for a lot of it, I'm like, well, why are people taking this? Because we don't know much about it, any of these things. We have safety research that shows it's safe, and that's okay. But generally when you go to the drugstore, you're looking for something that works. And you could go to the supplement aisle, which is kind of like what we're dealing with here, where it's like, oh, take this herb or whatever, and it might make you feel better. But we should be better than that. But there are some problems. You know, who benefits? Who benefits if this research is done? Do the pharmaceutical companies benefit? Do the cannabis companies benefit? Well, only if it's really positive. If the study's negative, well, they're not going to sell any more of this stuff. So it's a long-term investment that may well end up poorly for them. So there's not much reason for them to do those studies. Really, it should be governments doing this kind of basic research, but you know, that's been an issue for a long time, and certainly in America, there's no research happening ongoing. I mentioned that we're dealing with a shrinking medical market, so there's less reason for kind of people to do this when you could just take it. There's no money, and there's still big research barriers. Anytime you're involving cannabis and people with research, there's a lot of extra steps that have to be involved. There's more security. There's just a whole kind of other level of difficulty in conducting that research. So I think ultimately that's kind of what I wanted to say. You know, I think we can do better than have cannabis be the new herbalism. I'd love to see far more research being done to say, well, what does that CBN do? What does the CBG? Do these work at all? There's a whole big avalanche of research. It just hasn't even been looked into yet. So that's just my plea for the future. But I hope this was helpful in terms of kind of educating you a bit as far as being in the stores and what you might find there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. I can't imagine all the questions you must get from your patients about this and how you have to answer. Thank you for doing that. All right, I'd like to it's my privilege again to introduce a new speaker, Jordy Cates, who brings valuable knowledge and a unique perspective to today's conversation on medical cannabis and information regarding recovery. Jordy is a member of the Okanagan Indian Band and is a first-year Ph.D. student. Wow, you had time to come here today. You should be busy. Yay, you're here for that. Okay, so Jordy has a big background of education. She is a clinical psychology student at UBC Okanagan. She holds a bachelor degree of science in psychology with a biology minor and a master's in clinical psychology. Holy crow, your student loan must be high. And her past research has been focusing on Indigenous perspectives on cannabis use. And this work reflects her dedication to understanding both the cultural and scientific aspects of substance use. So currently, Jordy's doctoral research center is on microdosing on psychedelics. I believe she's with Dr. Zach Walsh, yes? Yeah, he's your supervisor. Okay. And this is a big emerging field, actually. And so we've got somebody here on the cutting edge of research and looking at harm reduction and also mental health treatment. So huge stuff ahead of you. Good for you. And I'd just like to introduce you to come up here, and I just want to thank you so much. I know you have a personal motto, which I think is so cool. It's, don't take no from someone who can't tell you yes. That is cool. That just embodies resilience and determination. No wonder you got all these letters behind your name. So we're really fortunate to have Jordy here today. Dr. Zach, you're going to have to let her out. She's in there, trapped. Please join me in welcoming her to share her insights on medical cannabis recovery and her work supporting Indigenous communities and advancing substance use approaches. Jordy, you got the floor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Yeah, that motto is something that Zach told me, so my motto typically changes every week with his wise words. But I'm really excited to be here today and to talk to you about my master's work. So this title is the title of my master's thesis, and it has one of the participants' quotes in it, actually, which is, "It's a plant, and that's why I think it's a medicine." But we'll look more at the project overview. Also, all my animations aren't going to work, so hopefully it's still entertaining. So as a brief overview, we like to call this project the CUTI project because it stood for Cannabis Use Among Indigenous Peoples of Turtle Island. So this project is really unique. It's a first of its kind, Indigenous-led, and it brought together cannabis use experts, mental health experts, Indigenous health experts, Indigenous research assistants, Indigenous communities, all with the hope of exploring cannabis use perceptions. And originally, we just set out to do one phase and partner with Woodland Cree First Nation and Indigenous Bloom Co., who they were an Indigenous kind of owned and operated dispensary. And so our goal was to kind of get a community sample and an urban Indigenous sample. We ran into some barriers along the way, but we still got a lot of participants. And then we were approached by Zagame Anishinaabe, which is an Indigenous community in Saskatchewan. And so then we ended up doing 2 phases. So those are all the participants I'm going to talk about today, and it's a wide array from all over, so not just in BC, but from a bunch of different home communities. So just as a kind of disclaimer, this is not to kind of speak to a population level perception. This is really just the perspectives of the respondents that we heard from. So really our aims were to share our methods and process. So how did we do this? What were we guided by? And really to provide a stepping stone for future researchers and communities to be able to explore the perceptions of cannabis use. And then we also really wanted to give rise to Indigenous voices. So these are voices that have been typically underrepresented in literature. And when I had gone through the literature, I found kind of 3 main issues. I really didn't see myself represented as an Indigenous woman, nor as a cannabis user. And I think that was because of 3 main reasons. So typically the research has been non-collaborative. It's typically been done on Indigenous peoples, not by or for Indigenous peoples. The second one is that there's typically deficit-based methods employed, which means that there's a focus on a deficit, on problematizing cannabis use, and that typically arises because Indigenous peoples are compared to non-Indigenous peoples. And this is like comparing apples to oranges, right? An Indigenous person is never going to be a non-Indigenous person and vice versa. And the last piece here is that there's a huge focus on frequency data. So how often is someone using cannabis? And then when that's compared to non-Indigenous peoples, you might see, oh, there's a higher risk of problematic cannabis use because there's a higher frequency of use. But what is really important here is asking why. Like, what is motivating people to use it? Why are they using it? Is it therapeutic? Is it recreational? Is it both? And so these things that we see in the literature do play out in, in real life, in the real world, and create barriers for people. And a report in 2020 called the In Plain Sight report highlighted this, and they showed that discrimination reaches every single corner of the healthcare system. And they found that 84% of Indigenous respondents experienced discrimination in the healthcare system. And this leads to a lack of trust and an avoidance of the healthcare system. And so these are very awful realities for people that are living today. And you might have seen kind of reports on the news or from like First Nations Health Authority, and it talks about the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in the toxic drug supply. And really, we shouldn't have to have that language to focus Indigenous perspectives. So this is why we need to have more Indigenous-led research that is beneficial for the communities and can prioritize those voices and perspectives. So now I want to look more at our project. This was just some background. So we utilize an approach called two-eyed seeing, and this is really the gift of multiple perspectives. And so this image in the middle represents two-eyed seeing. And so what it highlights here is one eye would be, for example, Indigenous perspectives, knowledges, ways of knowing and being, and the other eye would be Western. And then together, you have the gift of multiple perspectives. And this is something that we held very close with our team, and it really guided us throughout this project. And the 6 different components, I could go all into detail about how our project encompassed these, but because of the lack of time, you're just gonna have to trust me or read the large thesis document. But these are huge guiding principles that are typically seen when people employ this type of methodology. But from what I've seen, two-eyed seeing is not something that has been applied to substance use research. So like I said at the beginning, this is a first of its kind project, really to mitigate those gaps that we've seen in previous literature. So in conjunction with the two-eyed seeing, we followed OCAP principles, which is ownership, control, access, and possession, for Indigenous peoples to have all of these things for their own data. We created a data sharing agreement. So this makes sure that the data is owned by the right people, and they have access to it whenever they want it. In phase 1, we created an interview script. So what we did is we really wanted to prioritize kind of the relational storytelling aspects of Indigenous ways of knowing and being. And so we had open-ended questions at the very beginning, which allowed for the Indigenous research assistants to have conversations with the participants. And then it was followed up by more closed-ended questions. We did this over Zoom, and it was typically about an hour, hour and a half. And then with the participants who consented to receiving updates on the project, we gave them a preliminary findings sheet, and they were able to get in contact with us if they wanted to revise it. But this is really kind of highlighting that two-eyed seeing piece where, participants are an active part of the research process. And then in terms of data analysis, we didn't have hypotheses. We didn't want to impose any prior kind of beliefs because that's what has been done in previous research. So I did a thematic analysis on the open-ended stuff, and then we really just wanted to see what people were saying when they were answering those kind of closed-ended questions. And so we ended up having 69 people participate in total between the 2 phases, 61 in the first one and 8 in the second phase, predominantly female and under the age of 40. The majority identified as status-holding members of First Nations communities, and the remaining non-status, Métis and Inuit. And so I'm going to present a couple of the open-ended pieces first. So this one, we asked people, do you think that cannabis can be a medicine? And 98% of people said yes, absolutely. And I think this quote, I like this quote, some of my slides have quotes, some don't. But this person shared with us, I absolutely think it's a medicine. It's an internal sage. It helps with cancer, mental illness, and physical pain. And then we asked people, do you think cannabis can be both used as a medicine and used for pleasure? And we still saw a really high rate of endorsement. And this person says, I feel it can be both because that's something that I utilize in my capacity. I utilize the medicinal part to get me through the tough phases of my life and just to help me out on a daily basis. And then I also use it recreationally. For example, we have THC gummies. I use those on Friday nights by the pool or when we're going out to the lake and going camping out there. So we're really seeing that people, you know, it's not just this, I'm either using it therapeutically or recreationally. We see this kind of dual, at least dual motivations within one person. And so when we looked more at those kind of close-ended questions, we saw that only a minority of people were endorsing solely therapeutic or solely recreational motivations, where the vast majority are reporting both. And then when those people talked about, or they identified at least one therapeutic motivation, people were, sorry, I'm trying to read on this. People were typically reporting at least 8 motivations. And when they had reported a therapeutic motivation, they said that cannabis is either very helpful or extremely helpful for that main motivation. They were getting 80 to 100% relief for that main motivation. They're using it daily or multiple times a day. But unfortunately, only half of the people were able to always afford to buy enough cannabis. And I think an important piece here is that daily or multiple times a day piece, where in previous literature, we saw that that was problematized. But here, we're seeing it in a more therapeutic context, which is why it's so important to ask why people are using and not just assume that it's problematic, right? So looking more at some of the motivations that people endorsed within the last 6 months, we see kind of similarities with some of the other presentations that we've seen today, right? So a lot of endorsement for stress, anxiety, pain, and sleep. So although it's important to have this kind of research that is collaborative with Indigenous communities and is allowing the perspectives to kind of surface, we see that some of the motivations aren't very different. But I think what's important here is that the research is done collaboratively and can benefit the community, even if we are seeing similar motivations. But people aren't just using it for these, they're also using it as a substitute for other substances, like we've seen in previous presentations. So out of the people who were regular cannabis users, 52% of them talked about using cannabis as a substitute for other substances. And this person shares, when I was a crack addict, and I was in my past, when I was drinking was when I wanted to go buy crack, and when I smoked a joint, I didn't want to go buy crack. And crack was not the only thing that we saw people use cannabis as a substitute for. There was alcohol, benzodiazepines, cigarettes, MDMA, a variety of substances. And so this was really helping people in a variety of ways with a variety of substances. We also asked about stigma, which is something that we talked about in kind of the background piece of this. And so we asked people, well, do you think that cannabis is stigmatized as a potential medicine? And a lot of people did feel that it was still stigmatized, even though it's been recreationally legalized and we have medical cannabis here as well. There was still that stigma, and I think something that's important that I didn't necessarily highlight in the background is that that In Plain Sight report talked about stigma from a variety of facets, so ancestry, skin color, culture, substance use, and a term that I like to kind of talk about is that of double stigma, where an Indigenous person simultaneously experiences stigma and discrimination related to not only their Indigenous identity, but also their substance use. And so that's an important piece here that perpetuates and maintains these barriers that people have when accessing healthcare. And this person shares, yeah, for sure, I felt that my whole life. How do you explain to someone, look, if I don't smoke this joint, maybe I'll be suicidal today. But if you're sitting on a park bench and pull out your prescription medication and shove 3 of those down your mouth, you're an okay guy. So there is that, that stigma against cannabis still, or at least that people are still feeling it. And that's what we have to listen to, because these are the people that we're trying to help when we talk about the toxic drug supply. So we also, this is my last slide. We also wanted to ask about kind of those barriers to healthcare, and people did talk about those. 39% wanted to talk to their doctor about cannabis, but felt that they couldn't because they were scared, they were afraid to experience stigma, stereotyping, discrimination, they felt nervous, and these are all very real, right? And 46% had previously experienced discrimination from their doctors because of bringing up the topic of cannabis use. So if we think about all of this today, and this is kind of just the highlights, some of the highlights from my thesis, so I encourage you to go read the giant document if you're interested. But when we think about the key takeaways, we need to remember that previous literature on cannabis use in Indigenous peoples has, in my opinion, been conducted very poorly, and we need more of it, not just on cannabis use, but on substance use, and it needs to be collaborative, co-created, and it needs to be beneficial for the community, right? And in terms of just what we heard from our respondents, cannabis is a medicine. It's typically not considered problematic or used problematically. There was still stigma. People are using for a variety of reasons. People are using both therapeutically and recreationally within and between people. So it's really important to ask those other questions and provide spaces for people to share their experiences, or else we will end up with literature that doesn't necessarily reflect what people are experiencing. You can bug me if you want. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordy, so much. Thank you. That's very insightful. We're now moving into the recovery portion of today's event. And I don't want to spill any beans on anything, so I'll just move on with saying I'm truly honored to introduce Bob Hughes, CEO of Ask Wellness Society. Many of you from around this region, I'm sure, know of him. He is a leader in health, recovery, and community development. He's been doing it for 25 years, so 4 less years than I was born, right? Just kidding. His work has been, oh my gosh, I don't know what he hasn't done. He's been spanning across doing addiction counseling, harm reduction, youth support, housing initiatives. He's transformed services here in Kamloops and beyond, and even Penticton for vulnerable populations all across really the BC interior. He's a visionary in this field, and Bob is also instrumental in bringing TRU and UBCO together into our Maverick project, which we will share with you today about this mysterious project. He's really helped create new research and recovery opportunities for individuals impacted by substance use. And today he's going to share his insights into Ask Wellness's recovery program, including some maybe medical cannabis related information. And he's really been supportive in this innovative approach. He's a pioneer, really, and we need to take steps to do stuff like this to make change. So with deep respect, Bob, where are you? Oh, good. I can't see any of you out there. It's kind of dark, like you can barely see people out there, but I'm assuming people are there. So anyway, okay. You're all there, right? Okay, good. You came back? Okay, good. Okay.
Go ahead and stand up. Afternoon, everybody. How's that? Well, I'm really happy to be here today. I mean, it's a little intimidating, of course, to follow the speakers before me, and so my way of kind of presenting is really just from my heart. I don't necessarily have anything well prepared when I come and speak. So bear with me, and maybe it's a good thing that I can't see you. You guys could be asleep, or you could be grimacing, or you could be texting and saying, he just said probably the most offensive thing, or he's going to lose his job. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about how did Ask Wellness get to this position where we are working with UBC and TRU on providing some innovative research and update. But I also want to talk a little bit about, obviously, the organization that has created the Maverick, and I want to acknowledge my incredible colleagues that are here today that really are are the heart and soul of Ask Wellness Society and the work that we do across the region. And I think most importantly, these guys that are going to come up and talk about the real life experience of tackling their substance misuse, facing some of the demons that come with obviously finding yourself without a home and finding yourself really feeling quite hopeless, and we hear that. My motto has been, and really truly is recovery is possible. And as much as that might sound a little ambitious in the face of 9 years living, all of us, within one of the most challenging times in our society with the opiate crisis and a toxic drug supply crisis, to set a path forward to create recovery. I started in this work as Florriann has suggested over 25 years ago. My family came from a background. My dad was a physician. My mom was a psych nurse. And in fact, basically, I kind of grew up in the Homewood Sanitarium in Guelph, Ontario, where my parents were never really around. And so literally would spend after school walking around a mental health institution. So it is very deep in my life in terms of helping people and supporting people in their journey. So with Ask Wellness, obviously, it started out as the AIDS Society of Kamloops. I was the 7th employee with the society back in 2008, 2009. And we've grown really to move to not leave harm reduction, but our whole philosophy has been about trying to create programming and a culture, both within our staff, but also across all of our programming, that is streets, homes, health, employment. And we know that's not a linear pathway for many people that have struggled with barriers such as mental health, substance use. These are lifelong challenges that people face. And so our creation of programming has really been about trying to break down the barriers, the systemic barriers, to create a way for people that literally have a bag on their back or a shopping cart and feel like they have nothing, to be able to manifest a life that includes housing, healthcare, community, and a sense of purpose. And that has been really our life's work within Ask, is to try to develop that. And so over the course of 15 years, 18 years, we have over 800 units of housing. We've created enough programming where there's over 430 staff. And all of this team works with the same kind of philosophy, where hope is possible and supporting people to reach their potential. And for many people in Kamloops area, you think all we do is the harm reduction. But what I would suggest is that one of the main challenges in our province has been able to link harm reduction to treatment and recovery. And many of us may remember the days of the 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars was really our foundational approach, our framework that was set forth by it's escaping me now, is the mayor of Vancouver back in the early 2000s. And his whole idea around tackling that opiate crisis, the heroin crisis at the time, was to create the 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars: harm reduction, treatment and recovery, enforcement, and prevention. And somehow over the last 10, 15 years, we have abandoned that framework, and we have really set forth with individual pillars not working together. And what we have seen in us kind of creating the Maverick as a recovery center was that the journey from harm reduction services that we really needed and are so vital to trying to save people's lives is, how do you help people beyond just a harm reduction approach to actually see people entering into treatment, into recovery, and then employment and gaining autonomy. And so about 5 years ago, we set forth with really trying to create a recovery center that was different than what we would traditionally see as treatment. And so many of us know that treatment historically has been something structured in the United States to be 30 days. And that was really not anything scientifically based. That was based on the health insurance companies being able to bill how a treatment center would run. So doing 30 days of treatment. But anybody who's gone through treatment, and many people have repeatedly, when you have serious substance misuse, that you've gone to residential treatment, you've done supportive recovery, so often they are very narrow in windows, and they're an isolated little setup where you obviously can gain tremendous skills and benefits, but to translate that into real life living experience and the skills requires a great deal of time and a sense of community and a sense of safety. And so thus what we did is we were able to acquire, with the support of the province, we were able to acquire the Maverick, and that was a fitting name, I would believe, based on some of the things we're doing, particularly around cannabis, is to call it the Maverick. And it was a motel that we've, over this time, have now converted, initially with no funding. Guys like Peter Cameron Inglis, who was on our board of directors, we did not have funding to create a supportive recovery, but we believed we could do it. And inch by inch, dollar by dollar, we've created a 3-phase recovery center that is abstinence-based, that is targeting and supporting people that need it the most, and that is publicly accessible. And so we now have a 43-bed supportive recovery, 3-phase. We've been able to seek funding to support not only that initial 90-day and more intensive phase, but we've been able to recognize that people transition into the second phase of the program, which is up to 6 months, and it's an ability for people just to live in their recovery, to take their time to recover from the harms and the both physically and psychological that comes from such serious dependency. And then the really ambitious part that was finally manifest for us is the opportunity for people to get access to employment, supports to actually engage in finding a job and taking your time and receiving the supports to do it. We all know and have heard about housing first, but I believe the philosophy is jobs first, and that is with the idea that people can, everybody is capable of doing some form of work. And that work doesn't necessarily have to be just labor work, but something that makes them feel and gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of, I am economically able to support myself. I am able to participate and be within community. And so through the support of, and again, this is one of the beauties, I think, of a nonprofit is that you can create, with the pursuit of funding, you can create your vision. And what we've done with 7 different funding sources is create this long-term recovery center. And so when it came to doing the cannabis research, which I think most of you are here and want to know, is this started between Michael and I believing that the use of cannabis in a recovery setting, whether it would be early in a person's recovery or it would be as part of in a structured environment, was something that we should look at as having cannabis being available. And so we started, and I'm going to say it, I may get, it may not be well received by government, but that's fine by me. We did this in a parking lot where somebody who was so desperately needing to have access to cannabis, that was living in chronic pain as a paraplegic, and the idea was he wanted to use cannabis. And so that was the beginning for Michael and I to say, listen, let's try this in terms of making it accessible for people to get the type of cannabis. And this is when you hear Michael talk about it. The man is a visionary in how to use cannabis for a helpful and a very appropriate for each individual. And so it isn't just simply people being able to, using cannabis in any of any variety. He's been treating and looking at each individual and finding the right type of cannabis. And we hear Dr. Mitchell talk about the variations and the diverse tools that we have with cannabis when it comes to helping folks. And so that then evolved into saying, let's bring that into the Maverick as a tool for people. And as it noted up on the note here is, this isn't my first foray in trying to see cannabis and using substitution therapy. Back in the early 2000s, we tried it with youth in a program called Meth Kickers, and that was being able to see people who were at that time with the crystal meth epidemic happening, is to say for young people who would really struggle with being fully abstinent from substances, were saying, I want to be able to use cannabis, and they weren't participating in treatment. They were failing and weren't being eligible to be able to be in these programs. And when it came down to seeing if people were interested, young people, we had people flocking to the program saying, I want to do that because cannabis was helpful. And we hear and see that in the same way in a recovery setting. And so our journey to get here has involved a bunch of kind of challenging hurdles to overcome internally in terms of kind of the rhetoric, or not the rhetoric, but the sense of what treatment and recovery should be. You must be abstinence. A drug is a drug is a drug. And I would argue that is an oppressive statement when it comes to treatment. Individuals should be able to and can define what their recovery is. And all of us know that the difference between fentanyl and methamphetamine and cannabis is apples and oranges, as we heard earlier. And so the opportunity to provide safe, appropriately prescribed or authorized cannabis with the clinical supports that are available from folks like Tracy Bergman here who's in the room, and the supports of Darlene and Cheryl Doolin, creates an environment that is about stability. It's about meeting people where they're at. And now we're seeing the evidence of research showing that our intuition, our instincts, that this could work and be a complementary form of treatment and therapy in a recovery setting actually matters. So I just want to really acknowledge the efforts of Michael and his courageous leadership in doing this work, acknowledging the supportive community that we felt in the creation of this. And I want to thank, most importantly, all of these gentlemen and women that are part of the Maverick that inspire us in our work, where we're still facing on the streets, doing harm reduction services, seeing people feeling so destitute and lost, is that all it takes is to go to the Maverick and to see these gentlemen and women and folks feeling like their lives matter and feeling a sense of safety and security, and now becoming part of the helping world that we so desperately need, is more people willing to come forward. The peers are their answer to this opiate crisis, and you're going to hear these guys speak just so passionately and so articulately about their journey that really I think is the true meaning of what we do, is when we hear these voices from the people that we care about. I want to recognize my colleague Darlene, who's the Director of Recovery Services, who sometimes I think she thinks I'm a little out of my mind in terms of what we're going to do next, but she has literally been the champion for this incredibly relevant program that is so diverse and inclusive, and I want to thank the whole steering committee for everything you've done to support us in our work. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. He stole my thunder. I was going to point out Darlene. Where are you, Darlene? It's dark out there. You're somewhere in here. I did want to recognize she is on our Maverick Project team. She's at all of our meetings, and I think she keeps Bob in place. It's perfect. Really great. I wanted to put a little bit of information about you. Is that okay? She's a registered social worker, and also a lead in the Maverick Supportive Recovery and Center and Career program, supports individuals with bloodborne infections. She's championed services for the 2SL LGBTQ plus community. She's really a vital force in contributing to the Maverick Project research team, and she's our strength, and it gives us some really what's going on in the front lines, and keeps us focused. And I just really appreciate you and your ongoing contributions. So I just wanted to give you a hand on that one. Thank you. All right. Can you hear me okay? We're doing okay? Okay. Now I'd like to introduce you a little more formally to Michael, who's been here, Michael Koehn. He has been my co-host throughout this entire journey with all of our previous forums, and tirelessly, he's the one who pulls all the strings behind the scenes to help bring us together, especially for our advisory board meetings. We have these meetings monthly, and we get together and talk about where we're going with our research, and he keeps us all organized because we're like herding cats. We're so busy doing different things, so I do appreciate your patience with all of us. Michael is a recovery counselor. a mental health and cannabis clinician, a grower and a breeder, and a researcher and educator. He's the creator of the Maverick Medical Cannabis Formulary, which is the first of its kind toolkit for supporting lifelong recovery from substance use. And my goodness, if you were to have a definition of empathy, I would say Michael Koehn. Really. He's driven by relentless empathy, and he has a deep commitment to recovery, continues to shape the future of this field. Michael's passion for making real-world change is something I'm fortunate to be a witness every day to. And when I have meetings with him, no matter what's happened beforehand, I always feel so uplifted and inspired, and I just want to keep going on with this work because of him. So he has just got that positive energy that I just thrive to hang around with. So I just want to welcome you so much, Michael, to the stage, because you need to share with us what you've been up to and your powerful insights. And I have to let you know, my students love it when he comes to class to talk. It's like afterwards, I mean, how can I compete afterwards, really? So there you go. Anyway, thank you, Michael. Come on up here.
Oh my, no expectations there. This should be pretty easy for me. I got to say, like, we're surrounded by a group of just incredible people. Everywhere I look in this world that we work in, there are so many people with great hearts, great minds that are doing their very best to make a difference in a really difficult time. Ask Wellness is a visionary organization led by an absolute OG Maverick in Bob. I got to tell you, if anyone's going to sit in a parking lot with me and we're going to say, you know, we should really do the cannabis thing, and he goes, how about right now? That's exactly the kind of energy and spirit and attention that just shows what incredible people are here. So I got a lot to cover. We're going to do this really quick, so some folks might need to watch the YouTube afterwards, so buckle in. We got a lot to talk about. All right, the Maverick Medical Cannabis Program. How do we do this whole thing? Well, welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm really thankful that we have an opportunity to gather here at Thompson Rivers University on the unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. Thank you for this opportunity to join here together. All right, so I do some work in industry. I like to twist the arms of folks that are working in cannabis companies, because they are our conduit to get medicines made and into the legal medical cannabis system. So I do a little bit of work, haven't done anything recently, and none of these folks tell me what I should be thinking about or what I'm doing. In fact, quite the opposite. I often challenge the status quo. So myself, I'm a self-taught mental health professional, been working in cannabis for over 20 years. I own a medical cannabis clinic and a mental health agency. And I primarily work with people that have catastrophic injuries who do not recover with traditional or sort of regular ways of doing things. I'm just a regular guy, but honestly, what I care about is that I want to improve our world. I'm a dad. I've got a couple of great kids. My daughter actually crocheted this little pocket frog that's sitting right there. She wanted me to make sure I had that as a support while we were up here. So I want to make sure my kids have a world where when anyone's child is struggling or needs help, that we actually have a program and we have a place like the Maverick where you can be safe, where you can be taken care of. We all got to work together to create that. So I work in creating cannabis-based medicines, and in particular, I'm looking for ways in which we can solve some really challenging problems. Really quickly, we're going to talk about how we designed a new approach to the overdose crisis with our project. I'll talk to you a little bit about the Maverick Medical Cannabis Formulary, which are what I call plants that do jobs, and just kind of a little bit about what we're looking at next beyond our initial study. But first of all, the question is, why cannabis at all? Why look at a new approach? And as we've seen in the statistics that have been presented today, it has never been a more lethal time to be a person who is struggling with addiction and substance use. And through my work with our lived experience panel, I have been taught about the incredible danger of relapse, and that in today's climate, one single experience very likely can and will be the end of a person. And so the real loss of life and harm is present every single day. It's absolutely terrible out there. So what we did beyond when Bob and I met in the parking lot was we said, we're going to need a team. And so very quickly what we did is we reached out to our network of researchers, of doctors, of social agency folks and pharmacists and lived experience experts. And I hope I haven't missed anybody, but it goes on and on. There are so many people who have joined our team that have incredible insights and expertise. And you can imagine all of these folks looking at this problem that we're all faced with a new lens, through many different points of view. And in doing so, we built the Maverick Medical Cannabis Program, the MMCP. So I'll talk a little bit about the design, the intake, the process, and a little bit about the safeguards and mitigation of risks in how we did this work. So first of all, as I said, we have many different people looking at this from many regulated professions, people with different types of experience who can guide us so that when we think of it, when we plan it, when we design this, it's being done in a way that makes sense and is balancing the need to do something with something that would be considered safe. Number one focus in this project and everything we've looked at, you've heard the word before, stability. And in particular, when people are looking for results from recovery interventions, one of the greatest obstacles is that individuals who are using some of the conventional treatments to assist with stability are not having a sufficient result. And therefore, there's a lot of wobbling in folks. They're trying their best. They're holding on really tight. They're using the conventional sorts of tools, and they're struggling immensely. And unfortunately, many people are still having a relapse or having additional pain and suffering and struggles. So our focus, number one, was on stability of symptoms and experience 24/7 with a harm reduction focus. We looked at the risks of cannabis, but we also paid attention to the risks, and I like Dr. Walsh's approach on this, the risks of not cannabis. And so, for example, if we find that we have a tool, but we won't talk about it, we won't use it, we won't do anything with it, well, there's a risk to not using a tool that could be effective. Interestingly enough, our program prioritizes minimally to non-impairing cannabinoids in an oral, long-acting format as the mainstay of treatment. We're not simply looking at the recreational usage of cannabis, which I have nothing against. It's just simply not specific or directed or intentional enough to do jobs. So in our work, it's very specific, tools that do jobs. Did some important things that we do. We're not smoking joints. We're looking at oral therapies and inhalation through vaporization technologies. We made sure that we have ongoing medical and social supports, clinical supports that are all integrated together. So individuals aren't simply given cannabis and good luck. They're given cannabis and they're fully wraparound supported. So in addition to that, we said, you know, we're doing something new and different. We better make sure we have some great folks from universities that are going to follow us, that are going to study this work and ensure that we are able to do what we're doing today. So the design of the intervention took a little bit of time. In there, people wonder, well, how do you work through this process? Well, first of all, patients and participants in this program are established in conventional treatment therapies and modalities prior to entering into an experimental condition, such as the one that's here. So in order to balance off the needs to try something new with what is established and what is proven to have some success and efficacy, people, first of all, would go through traditional programming, which the Maverick system and Ask Wellness would provide. If individuals were going to be considered for this program, they have an intake process from Ask, they have an intake process from the CanSolve Clinic. And so both intakes provide an opportunity for different points of view to assess the suitability of a person for the program. And if they are deemed to be appropriate, then they are given a medical consultation with Dr. Mitchell, who you've heard speak here today, and ongoing weekly clinical support education that's been designed by a doctor and a clinician, myself, Dr. Carolyn McCallum, partnered with me on that. And we have this ongoing support service where people, again, are not simply given cannabis, they have wraparound continuous supports. Okay, and in addition to that, we would have people that would have all of their medical cannabis supplies provided for them at no cost whatsoever to the participants. Now, some of the safeguards and mitigation, as I mentioned, this is an evidence-based world that we're working in. So since we're doing something experimental, it was important we started with conventional. We then use medical cannabis as what's called an adjunctive or in addition to therapy. We have a double intake process, as I mentioned before, and all of that education is provided by people who know a lot about the type of work that we're talking about, so physician and clinician-led support. and ongoing assistance and support. Anybody who has adverse reactions or has any issues which are surprisingly uncommon, we have physician support, access, and follow-up available to all participants in the program. So let's talk a little bit about a formulary, plants that do jobs. Well, right away when I say the word jobs, what do I mean, jobs? Well, it's interesting, but when we look at the literature to find out, well, what is it that patients are actually looking for, I think as you read that list there, you can see that there's an awful lot of common things that a lot of people, not just folks in recovery, but a lot of people would be interested in getting support services for. So medical cannabis contrasted with recreational cannabis is intentional and it's goal-driven. We are attempting to address those specific needs of patients. So whether it's I'm looking to improve my quality of life, I need stability, I need symptom stability, I'm struggling with sleep or pain or mental health or trauma, we are specifically targeting the tools that we do to enhance a person's ability to treat those symptoms. In our particular formulary as well, we are working with a new class of cannabinoids up here in the raw sort of section up here, as opposed to what a lot of people know, which is sort of in the heated or aged. Maybe for folks that don't know a lot about the chemistry of cannabis, it's important to note that the raw plant actually contains different compounds than what you do when you roll it in a joint, light it on fire, and inhale it. The fire chemically converts the cannabis from the raw format at the top to what's called the heated or aged aspects of the cannabinoids. And so in our work, I want to be clear that our primary mainstay of therapy is all up in the raw category, which means it's entire whole plant medicine. And so what's interesting is that these patients were reporting that they were having significant improvements using non-impairing cannabis tools, including what we call the acid forms of cannabinoids. And raw cannabis has over 500 different compounds, many of which we still do not fully understand. But this is more so what a raw cannabis shake looks like. Actually, that's me holding one up there. I actually drank that. It's feels great, by the way, but it's very green. So we work from the raw whole plant, and in doing so, allow nature to be nature. And what's really interesting is then I grew over the last 7 or 8 years specific plants to do specific jobs and built a toolkit that we call the M series cultivars, which is in honoring of the Maverick where everything started. And so here we have our M1, M2, and M3 cultivars. And don't worry about all the details on those, but every one of those plants is specifically harnessed to do specific jobs. Now, at the end of the day, when you use any intervention, there is a simple 3-part test that you can ask any patient, cut through the noise, and immediately get to what's working, what's not. And we call this the 3 yes rule. It comes from a colleague of ours, Dr. Carolyn McCallum, did a paper in 2018 with Dr. Ethan Russo, where they identified 3 things. If you go to a patient and a patient says yes to these 3, improvements in symptom control, improvements in function, improvements in quality of life, chances are that's a therapy you want to keep. If it's yoga that does that, keep the yoga. If it's cannabis, it's cannabis. It does the job and gets the results. And so we went and decided to match the treatment to the need. So 24/7 care or as needed. Turns out, in our work, both matter tremendously. We have chronic conditions that require a 24-hour, round-the-clock support, and that's in our oral therapies and our oils that we've developed. And then we also have an inhalation component that allows for people to, on demand, in the moment, take control of things such as cravings, acute symptoms, and allow themselves to maintain that stability. And so, in doing so, we were able to generate a uncommon result and outcome. And I'm really grateful that the next speaker who's going to come up is actually going to take you right through the paper and the observations and the findings of our first phase of our research. So I'll leave that to Chris to discuss that. But suffice to say, at the end of the day, this particular program has offered new opportunities to treat some of the most stubborn symptom clusters, the most treatment-resistant symptoms that individuals who are working through a recovery journey are faced with. And in doing so, when you can create consistent stability, as we've heard, from there, people will go on to move and evolve from the current stage that they're at through to better health, better education, better housing, better opportunities, and that autonomy that comes from having reclaimed your life from substance use to now have your own. And that has been my greatest honor, and what just gets me so pumped about this work and why I just can't stop talking about it is because of the people that you're going to see at the end of our talk here today. These are the individuals I have such tremendous respect for. They are my teachers, and they are the people that are driving this research. They are the scientists and the people that are creating the answers. Incredibly grateful to them, every one of the folks in the Maverick program and Ask Wellness for hosting this intervention and being so bold and brave to try something new and different. And so since our first study was quite successful, we're now looking at our Maverick study, phase 2. And we're particularly excited in this next one to focus on increasing our study size, increasing the diversity of individuals who are in there, the duration of the program so we can have more time to study the people that are going through the program. We want to make this available to more people, with a goal of eventually making this therapy available to all who need it. And we'd like to also encourage more cooperation between all the different agencies that are stakeholders in this work, because now that we have a new and exciting area to research and work together, we got a lot of stakeholders to update, a lot of folks to inform and get on board with the work that we're doing here. So I'm incredibly excited to be a part of this work. I can't wait to see where we go next with it. And I just want to say thank you so much to the entire Maverick team. You guys matter, and you just mean the world to me. So thank you for everything you're doing, and I just appreciate you so much. Thank you.
This is exactly what happens when he comes to my class. Everybody claps afterwards, and then it's like, oh, Florriann's back up. And you're just so passionate. I just love it. Well, we have another speaker to come up, Christopher Nelson, who I'm just thrilled to introduce. He is one of our senior research assistants, and we've actually had two senior research assistants. Another one, Lindsay Lowe, who's not here, she is doing her third year of med school. Since we've been developing our program, we've had quite a few research assistants go through a lot of career changes. It's just been awesome. So when Christopher joined us at the time, he was working on his second master's degree, and so was Lindsay. And then he got into his Ph.D. and she got into med school. And then we had about 10 researchers that were in nursing school at varying degrees, and all of them, except for one, have graduated. 2 of them have gone off to do a master's degree. One will be graduating in December, and the rest are working in community health or maternity health, and one is working right outreach down on in Vancouver. So we have somehow, in some way, I don't know, it's just been amazing how all of this has just been carried forward. So our team has grown and moved and continues to grow. So I'd like to introduce Christopher Nelson up, our senior research assistant with this particular Maverick project. He's been doing a bunch of other things as well. I said he's a Ph.D. student with Zach at UBC, and his master's research was super interesting. He examined substance use and anxiety during the pandemic, and now his focus is on cannabis and psychedelics for both recreational and therapeutic use. He has helped lead all sorts of projects exploring stigma-related barriers to medical cannabis, and he is going to come up here and sort of walk you through what we've done with this pilot project. And he just brings a lot of rigor and compassion, and he's got this calming sense of humor as well that keeps us going. And I love his mantra. It's with the Grateful Dead seems to be the theme. I've heard it a few times with some of you. We will get by, we will survive. So here we go. And you're going to survive coming up here, right? You coming? Okay, good. Anyway, please help me welcome him.
Thank you, Florriann, for that lovely introduction. And thank you both, Michael and Florriann, for putting on this wonderful event for all us to learn about what's going on here at Kamloops and beyond. So I'm just going to jump right into it so we have plenty of time to hear from our lived experience panel. The Maverick Cannabis Project was one of the first recovery programs in Canada to formally integrate medically directed cannabis use into a structured residential setting. This is a significant departure from traditional recovery frameworks that typically followed strict abstinence-based models. Instead, the Maverick supportive recovery program embraced a harm reduction and client-centered approach aiming to meet individuals where they are and offer supportive therapeutic tools, including medical cannabis as part of their recovery. For researchers, this presented a unique opportunity. Very little has been documented about what it looks like to integrate cannabis into formal recovery programming under medical supervision. So this project allowed us to do a couple of things. First, it allowed us to document what this kind of innovation looks like in practice, as well as understand how both clients and staff experience the program, and evaluate its feasibility, risks, and potential benefits in real-world conditions. Essentially, we wanted to know, can medical cannabis be part of a safe, effective recovery strategy, and what does it take to make that possible? Given the innovative nature of the Maverick program, or the Maverick program, this study was designed with several key aims in mind. First, we wanted to explore how clients experience medical cannabis use during their recovery. Not just whether it helped, but how it fit into their broader recovery process in daily life. Second, we needed to understand staff perspectives. Since staff play a central role in supporting recovery, their buy-in or discomfort can significantly shape program outcomes. Third, we were interested in how structured cannabis education contributed to both client safety and staff engagement. Did education change perceptions? Did it support more informed and responsible use? We also wanted to assess the feasibility and acceptability of integrating medical cannabis into a formal residential program. Could this model work in a real-world clinical setting? And finally, we aim to identify both the benefits and the barriers from stigma and policy uncertainty to therapeutic value and improved engagement. These insights can help inform future implementation in similar settings. Overall, the study was not just about whether cannabis works, it was about understanding what happens when it's introduced thoughtfully into a recovery environment. This research was a collaborative effort between the University of British Columbia and Thompson Rivers University, reflecting a shared commitment to exploring cannabis use in recovery settings through rigorous community-engaged research. We designed the study as a mixed method naturalistic pilot, which means we collected both qualitative and quantitative data while observing the program as it unfolded in real time. The study included 21 participants in total, 14 clients and 7 staff members from the Maverick Supportive Recovery Program. Data collection occurred over the span of about 1 year, allowing us to track participant experiences and outcomes over time. Outcomes were evaluated using a combination of semi-structured interviews and validated assessment tools included the Q-R and the BScN. Both clients and staff perspectives participated in interviews at multiple intervals, and this repeated measures approach helped us understand both the initial reactions and how perspectives evolve over time. So this graph shows the timeline for data collection in the Maverick cannabis study. Participants, both clients and staff, were engaged at 4 key time points. First, at the initial program entry stage, then again at 1 month into participation, followed by a 3-month check-in, and finally a 6-month follow-up. This longitudinal approach allowed us to observe how perspectives, cannabis use patterns, and engagement with the program evolved over time. It also helped us assess both immediate and more sustained outcomes related to medical cannabis use in a recovery setting. While not all participants completed every phase due to factors like early discharge or dropout, the timeline was key to capturing the depth and progression of lived experiences. Our evaluation focused on several core outcomes that reflect both individual experience and program level impact. First, we looked at treatment effectiveness, particularly in terms of symptom relief, things like sleep, mental health, and pain, and how cannabis was used in place of other substances. We also assessed the feasibility in integrating medical cannabis into a structured recovery setting, including how well it fit with the program and whether clients and staff could engage with it in a meaningful way. Acceptability was a major theme. How open clients and staff were to this model and what factors shaped their willingness to participate. And we explored general perception, how people felt about cannabis being used therapeutically in a recovery setting, especially in light of traditional abstinent-based expectations. On the method side, qualitative analysis involved thematic analysis of interviews with both clients and staff, and this helped us identify core themes and understand their lived experiences. We also captured emerging insights about stigma, staff discomfort, and the evolving role of harm reduction in clinical care. Many of the clients in our program reported a range of perceived benefits from using medical cannabis. The most frequently cited included pain relief, improved sleep, and enhanced mental health, all noted by 100% of the participants who were at the study at 3 months, who remained in the study at 3 months. Another key benefit was drug substitution and reduced cravings that was reported by 86% of clients. This suggested cannabis may play a role in helping clients move away from more harmful substances. In addition to these perceived benefits, 2 emergent themes came up in the data. One was the use of cannabis as a substitute for prescription medication, and the other was stigma, identified as a barrier that limits access to cannabis treatment options. Importantly, all participants described cannabis as either very helpful or extremely helpful for their recovery journey, and again, 86% reported a noticeable reduction in cravings. Clients also shared that cannabis helped them stay on track with their treatment plans, manage withdrawal symptoms more effectively, and remain engaged in the rehabilitation program. To help illustrate these findings, I'd like to share a few direct quotes from our clients. These comments highlighted the deeply personal and often transformative ways in which cannabis has supported their recovery. As you'll hear, the benefits span physical, emotional, and psychological domains. One participant shared, "It helps with my mood overall, and it helps me with maintaining my energy, with my sleep, my anxiety, and my depression." Another noted, "The inflammation is down. I love that about cannabis. It doesn't mask the pain, so you don't damage it more." Participants also described improvements in sleep as reflected in the statement, "I sleep like a baby, and if I'm a little bit tired, I just lay down and think of peaceful things, and I have a nap. I've never been able to do that." For others, cannabis supported substance use recovery. Cannabis, in quote, "Cannabis has significantly reduced the chance of me relapsing. If I would get a craving, I would smoke a joint and I'd feel a lot better." As well as, "When I use cannabis, I don't take opioids. I wean myself off of them and completely substituted it with cannabis." As we explored staff perspectives, we found a wide range of views reflecting their diverse therapeutic backgrounds and philosophies around recovery. Some staff recognized medical cannabis as a valuable tool. They noted that it helped clients manage symptoms like pain, anxiety, low mood, and sleep disturbances, and it even enhanced engagement and rehabilitation. On the other hand, some were more cautious. They voiced concerns about the potential for relapse and felt that cannabis use might conflict with traditional abstinence-based recovery models. Across the board, many staff expressed a strong need for more education. They wanted clinical guidance and opportunities to participate in shaping the cannabis program so they could better support their clients. Finally, stigma came up repeatedly. Both personal beliefs and broader cultural attitudes were seen as barriers, not just to staff acceptance, but also to open, supportive conversations with clients. In summary, our findings point to several important takeaways. First, medical cannabis may offer a promising harm reduction strategy, particularly in helping some individuals reduce or replace their use of more harmful substances like opioids or alcohol. Second, we found that integrating medical cannabis into an existing recovery program was not only feasible, but also well received by many clients. This highlights the potential for cannabis to serve as part of a more personalized and responsive approach to treatment. At the same time, we saw that stigma, especially among staff, remains a key barrier. This underscores the need for ongoing education, training, and open dialogue to support thoughtful implementation and address concerns. Ultimately, the success of this pilot study points to the potential for wider application in similar recovery settings, but further research is essential to replicate our findings, expand the program responsibly, and continue addressing stigma within recovery frameworks. Again, this is an evolving area of research, and we're just beginning to understand the full range of therapeutic possibilities and the questions they raise. Thank you very much, and you can contact me here.
Thank you so much, Christopher. We've gone through a lot with our small pilot study, but it isn't small. There's so much more to do now. We've just uncovered so many more questions, and I'm really excited about where we're going with it, so thank you. This is going to be my favorite part, I think. This is when we want to introduce the lived experience panel. Now, did you want to play a video first before we go into this? Okay, so we have a little surprise for you, and I'm going to go sit there because I want to see it full on. Is that okay with you if I do that? Is that being a bit selfish? Okay, we have a little surprise. I'm not really sure how to introduce it other than I'm just going to let it happen, okay? So I'm going to come sit with you, and we're going to watch a little video put together by Michael. And there's a group over here, you will see.
The second someone mentioned you were all alone, I could feel the trouble coursing through your veins. Now I know it's got a hold. Just a phone call left unanswered had me sparking now. These cigarettes won't stop me wondering where you are. Don't let go and keep a hold. If you look into the distance, there's a house upon the hill, guiding like a lighthouse. It's a place where you'll be safe to feel our grace, cause we've all made mistakes. If you've lost your way, I will leave a light on. Well, I will leave a light on. Well, I will leave a light on. I will leave a light on. Tell me what's been happening, what's been on your mind. Lately you've been searching for a darker place to hide. That's alright. But if you carry on abusing, you'll be robbed from mine. I refuse to lose another friend to drugs. Just come home. Don't let go. Cause if you look into the distance, there's a house upon the hill, guiding like a lighthouse. It's a place where you'll be safe to feel our grace, cause we've all made mistakes. If you've lost your way, well, I will leave the light on. 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 Cause if you look into the distance, there's a house up on the hill, guiding like a lighthouse. It's a place where you'll be safe to feel like grace. If you've lost your way, if you've lost your way. And I know you're down and out now, but I need you to be brave. Hiding from the truth, ain't gonna make this all okay. I see your pain, you don't feel like grace, and you've lost your way. I will leave a light on. I will leave the light on. I will leave the light on. I will leave the light on.
I would like to introduce you to this part is the reason why I do the work I do. Because of these folks here, these brave warriors who are going to come share. I'm going to come share their story. And to be honest, I think we might need some Kleenex. Maybe I needed. Taylor, John, Austin, Chris, Dave. Am I missing anybody? It's hard to read my notes. It's dark over here. They are the pulse of the Maverick Project. Their courage, their honesty, their lived experience don't just inspire us, they guide us. I'm not a teacher when I'm around them. I'm not a teacher when I hear their stories or when we're doing any kind of research regarding our project. I'm a learner, I'm a student. And you are the teachers, you are the professors, you are the ones that are saving lives. And I can't thank you enough for coming today because you've come from all different places and to make time to come here. And the amount of work that you're doing, I'm so glad that we're putting this on YouTube because people need to see the real world and what's really going on. And this panel, I think you're going to have a chance to hear some raw truth. They're just going to be themselves. And this is radical hope happening here. So real stories from people walking the walk. I want to please join me in welcoming Michael and the Maverick Lived Experience panel. And just thank you in advance. And please just listen with your hearts. Thanks.
Well, we're good to go on the microphones. Wonderful. Guys, check. Do we have something on there? We're good to go? Yeah, okay, we're good to go. Guys, I'm so excited to be here on the stage with you right now. This has been a long time coming. We've been through a lot of steps together, a lot of journey. We've gone a lot of miles, and I'm just so grateful to every single one of you. You guys are incredible. I'm really proud to call you colleagues, and I'm so glad to occupy a space around the table with you. If you really want to learn about a challenging problem, I think the first thing that you can do is go and speak to the experts. And everybody here, you're sitting in front of you right now, is an expert in this field. So just to kind of keep the jitters and the nerves a little down here, we got some simple basic questions we're going to ask, and then we're just going to see where that takes us, okay? So because we've got Taylor here just to the left of me, we're going to start with Taylor. And I'm just going to ask you maybe just introduce yourself to everybody here and tell us a little bit about your lived experience with substance use. And finally, let's talk a little bit about why medical cannabis is important personally to you in your recovery.
Okay, yeah, I'm Taylor Purdy. I'm a peer coordinator with Ask Wellness and Urban Matters and peer educator with Interior Health. So my experience, I'm just going to start right off by saying, I have over about 13 years of substance use addiction. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I avoided all treatment centers and recovery centers like the plague because I couldn't bring cannabis into them. And I struggled on my own, doing it over and over and over again to try to relapse, or to try to get clean. I would relapse over and over just using opiate replacement therapies, work, or just using high THC strains, and it didn't ever end up working out. I got, addicted to a lifestyle where I got addicted to money, and I'm very lucky to not have been put behind bars, and I put that lifestyle away, and I still kept relapsing over and over again with the tools that I had, and it wasn't working. And it wasn't until I was essentially about to go into a septic shock from abscessed teeth. the lifestyle I lived, I had money to spend on teeth, and they would get knocked out, and I would put them back in, or get root canals, and over, and they all ended up failing till I got to a point where the infections were so bad, I was about to die, and I had to make my way into a detox center and make a change before I disappeared off the planet. And I had to go to detox twice to get into the lovely Maverick that has saved my life. But it's a popular place, and there was a waiting list. But all it took was an intake with someone who was working there to look me in the eyes and treat me like a normal human, to really give me that little bit of hope, and also talk about the amazing experience that was happening, that was just starting up at the Maverick that Michael was introducing. And I just felt like it was a sign from the universe. Like, here I am avoiding all methods of recovery and treatment because I truly believed I can bring cannabis into it, and that's what I needed. But I really had no idea what I was talking about or what I thought I needed. When I got into the Maverick, I was just blown away by the amount of recovery options that they were able to provide there. It was a recovery buffet. If something didn't work for me, I could find something that did, and they made sure I did. And not only that, the initial thing with all recovery is if you can do all this, learn these amazing tools to work on yourself, but until you get that stability that we've heard before, it's not very useful. And that was one of the things. I was so gung-ho on all these recovery methods, but this abscess teeth, these infections, this pain, it kept coming back. It stopped me from eating, stopped me from sleeping, and engaging in any recovery. And once I was able to get on the program with Michael, talk about game changer, it was unreal. First off, I kind of got fed up with fixing my teeth, and I asked for a dentist to take them all out and put dentures in there. And after a lot of talking, they really didn't want me to take them all out. They could have fixed them, but I was sick of fixing teeth. So they convinced me to keep a bottom 6 for a bottom partial. But long story short, I got a big extraction, all the top teeth I have, and the dentist said, using these CBDA oils, I healed over twice as fast as anyone they've seen come in there get that kind of extraction. And I was still smoking a pack of cigarettes a day at that time. I don't know how that's possible, but it did, and I kept using it. And it not only helped with the frustrations of getting immediate dentures and they're not fitting properly, constant issues, friction sores, pain, and I couldn't even eat. I couldn't touch my teeth together. And as soon as I did use the CBD oils and put it in there overnight, I was actually able to put them back in the morning. I was able to eat, and I was able to figure things out. It's a constant issue. I'm still having to deal with getting new ones and dealing with the discomfort. But without the CBDA, I wouldn't have been able to. My job has taken me in the direction of a lot of speaking and groups that I do. And if my teeth aren't there, I can't really pronounce my words. So it's a very important thing that I need to have, and it has a lot of power over me. But if I didn't have these tools provided by Michael and this beautiful team, I wouldn't have had a chance. And yeah, I feel like I could go off days about this, but essentially it helped me get off of also the pharmaceuticals that I was put on in early recovery. So I tried methadone many times, and it did not work. It was just painful. I did use it for a period of time with cannabis, and I got about a year working construction until I relapsed in COVID. But when I got in the Maverick, I was on Sublocade, Trazodone, Seroquel. My past, I used high doses of fentanyl, meth, cocaine. I used it all. I was intravenous. I was a very heavy user. And when I went into the Maverick, I was on Sublocade, Trazodone, Seroquel for sleep, and Vyvanse to be able to focus because I have ADHD. And I got put up to the highest dose possible for Vyvanse, I believe, that they have. And using CBDA, THCA, and the tools provided here, along with my recovery, I was able to get off of all of those withdrawal-free. And I'm down, except for one, I'm down to the lowest dose I can be on for the stimulant Vyvanse, and I'm almost there. But using these holistic medicines, I've been able to scrap pharmaceuticals completely. I'm almost on 100% holistic, just using this and the recovery tools that I have learned. So it's really created an opportunity for me to have a completely personalized recovery, an authentic one, and one that works for me, which is the most important to get the best success. So I could sit here and talk for days, but we got some amazing people and beautiful things to hear. So I'll pass it on.
Wow. Thank you, Taylor. All right, Austin, here you are. You know, in particular, Austin, I'm really thankful that you're here today. I know it's tough getting up on stage, and I know it's difficult public speaking. I know it's tough, right? Usually we sit around a table with a bunch of donuts.
Yeah.
And I call myself Donut Guy, and it's a lot easier, right? Like it's like, would you like a Timbit? You know, it's no problem. Yeah. But now we're up on stage and we're doing all this, and I know how much it means that you're here today.
Oh yeah, so, no, this whole program has been absolutely incredible. Honestly, life-changing. You know, my name's Austin, 32. Brief little recap the last couple of years. I was a heavy drinker in a toxic relationship. Ended up getting homeless. You know, wasn't very good there. Thank God I had family, came and saved me. But then I still realized I was still drinking. So, you know, thank God parents were like, maybe try treatment. So I was like, okay, why not? So thank God Maverick called me in like not even a week. It was incredible, right? So going to an intake, everybody was so nice. Came in a week later, and yeah, it was probably one of the best decisions I've made for sure. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how medical cannabis is important for you personally in terms of your recovery.
Well, it's just essentially from my recovery, I'm recovering not just from alcoholism, but for, you know, a lot of trauma from, you know, circumstances I was in. So I lost a lot of self-confidence, had high anxiety, and very big rooms full of people. Could be like, you know, even 10 people, but I mean, right now I think I'm doing somewhat okay. Thank you. But yeah, no, so with these oils, you know, I've been able to, you know, not just one sleep, but with that anxiety thing was one of the biggest things. You know, I'm able to go out to hang out with like 50 people in a room for hours on end now and not feel uncomfortable. You know, I don't have to feel like I don't have to, you know, run away or go have, you know, me time before I can re-enter and talk to another person. So that's been incredible for that aspect. You know, sleep-wise, you know, I tried many different prescription meds, you know, and from antidepressants as well. You know, I just didn't like the way I felt. None of them worked. And figuring out I have a nighttime anxiety and taking the oils at night, it just helps crazy amount. Like, you know, instead of waking 5 times a night, I'm waking up maybe once or twice. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right? Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, no, this program has changed my life. Honestly, I can't be any happier. You know, Maverick's given me a job there. I work in the kitchen, get to cook for the clients, which I absolutely love doing. You know, I don't even call it work. It's just my life. So, yeah, no, it's since this program, it's changed everything for me.
You know, thank you so much for that. I'd like to note that this is actually your first time going into a recovery setting.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting from your perspective is you reached out for help, and the Maverick was your first experience with a recovery facility. And so what I'm excited about is that when a person has a need for support and they reach out to a program like the Maverick with Ask Wellness, when it's your first time, and this is the result that you can generate, it's particularly important in my opinion.
Oh yeah, no, it was huge. And I mean, like I said, I had like no self-confidence and total social anxiety, but I have a family now there, right? So it's amazing there. That's all I can say.
Well, we're just so proud of you. Thank you so much, Austin. Yeah. All right, Chris. Well, Chris, thank you so much. Chris made the trip from the Lower Mainland up here today, and he's doing a quick overnight and right back home into work. And so an extra special thank you, Chris, for making the journey and coming up here. And you fulfilled your promise that you made to me, which I honor you for, too. You said, Michael, when it comes time to talk, I'll be there. I'll share with people. So thank you, sir. I appreciate you so much. So please take it away.
No problem. Thank you, Michael. My name's Chris. I had a bad addiction since probably 13 or 14. Early in life, things got hard at home, and I was kind of, just to say, kind of on the street pretty early. I found that I got more love from my thug friends than I did at home at the time, so I was kind of stuck, and that led into obviously substance abuses, and then it got so bad that it would start, I went to jail, and that was probably really bad because you meet people in there and it's just a little different, and life was not so good at times, like not good. I hit some lows real bad, and I would try to get on a pharmaceutical to get me off fentanyl, which was hard because when you're using both, it's really hard. Sometimes I'd get up to like 100 mils and then miss 3 days and then it's canceled, and there'd be other times where I was clean for a while and my script would go wrong, and it would happen on a Friday, and then there's no time to get it by Monday, and if you don't understand fentanyl, you're relapsing. The first day maybe, but the second day you're like, screw this. And that was life for a long time. It was hard. Then I was smart enough to leave Surrey, Wally, when I was using needles at the time, and I said, I'm gonna die, I have to get out of here. So I was strong enough to leave there and go to Langley and just smoke it, but it saved my life pretty much at the time. But it was hard because I got stuck there for 2 years before I came here. And then I just had the courage to get out of there and had a family member from here pick me up and drive me out here, and we found Maverick, thank God. And things got really good for me when I got to Maverick because I knew I wasn't on methadone at the time, so it was really hard in detox, and I wasn't, and you can't just cut that cold turkey. There's no friggin' way. So I did get in at my aunt's house on methadone. Maybe I got to about 50 or 60 mils or something, and then came to the Maverick. And I still was not feeling good, so I had to go up to 200 mils. I got up to at the time, and it helped me. It helped me get my life in gear and be functional for sure. But I knew that there'd be a time that I had to get off that, and I was always wondering how. And then when I got to Maverick, maybe a month in or two, I would smell it sometimes, and I thought, what the hell? Like, there's no way they have a cannabis program or something here. There's no way it's a recovery. It's just not going to happen. And sure enough, there was a miracle. Like, Michael was here, and I was talking to a counselor, Tracy, who's awesome, and she helped me a lot and introduced me to Michael, and it changed my life, you know? So it's pretty crazy. It allowed me to get off methadone. So I got up to 200 mils, and I'd say I was at the Maverick for about 17 months. It helped me stay there through some hard times, for sure. And it helped me get off methadone. So the day I left, I did a urine sample, and it wasn't in my system anymore. So I kind of left with a bang. That's good. Yeah. And, you know? And, you know, I've been 2 months back into where I came from, which statistics shows probably not that good, but I'm still clean, and it's like easy now. Like, I find it easy with support around me, and I'm just too busy right now to get in any trouble, you know? And that's about it. That's my story. That's how it helped me. And I wanted to help others. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, John.
There we go.
All right, here we go. It's your turn. That was quite a picture on that slideshow, by the way, there. I think you have all the muscles. Though, yeah, I got to say, there were some muscles. I didn't know that there were muscles, but I guess you have them. So congrats, man. Take it away.
And there's the anxiety again. Thanks, Michael. Yes, hello, everybody. My name is John. In November, I will have 4 years clean and sober. And that is... Yeah, it's absolutely crazy to think about, because I was just doing the math in my head a minute ago, and I've been struggling with substance misuse since I was at least 10 years old. So that's over 15 years. That blows my mind that I struggled with it that much. And it wasn't just even the hard drugs. Like, I was stealing alcohol and cigarettes and fucking popping my medication like candy when I was like 11 years old. I remember I almost died when I was 12, actually, because I popped my whole bottle of medication. My mom found me like drooling on myself on my bedroom floor. So yeah, that was a bit of a wake-up call for my parents, I guess, because then they sent me off to military school. And that didn't help at all, because then after I got out of there, I just rebelled and went even harder, went to the streets, moved to Kelowna, started stealing trucks, doing robberies and armed robberies. By the time I was 15, got a criminal record, and spent my 16th birthday in Kelowna City cells for 2 weeks. That was a blast. Yeah, so I don't know. I've struggled with substances a lot, and it was just, I thought it was for fun, but I think I was subconsciously self-medicating myself because I did not like myself or life. And I went to, like Chris mentioned, I went to where I felt actual acceptance, not judgment. And that was with misfits and drug addicts and people that sold drugs and committed crime and stuff, because they're like, yeah, they didn't really care where you came from. They were just happy to have someone to be around, because everybody at the end of the day is looking for a connection. And what is the opposite of addiction? Connection. Yeah, so now I'll tell you a little bit about myself now. I am now the old Taylor, new me at the Maverick, the peer employment support worker. A little bit about my role is I'm a friend for people coming in off the street. I can relate to their experience coming through the program. I can relate to their experience on the street, because I've been through quite a bit of it. I can't relate to all of it, but I can relate to having been through struggle and not wanting to live with that being an everyday thing anymore. Yeah, this program, the cannabis program, has absolutely changed the trajectory of my path completely. I was just thinking, like, it was crazy. A little over a year ago, I almost fought a guy because he sat in my spot at the kitchen table. Like, that's mind-blowing. And now I can, like, actually, I've learned the tools because I've been able to regulate my nervous system thanks to the oils well enough to where I can actually pause and think to myself, is it going to be beneficial to myself and everyone around me if I knock this guy out right now? Probably not. So let's not do that. And at the end of the day, like, he might not have been thinking about how that's going to affect me. He's like, I don't know what's going on in his life. And fuck, even 6 months ago, I was still struggling to have that kind of mindset. And it just goes to show what kind of progress can be made with stability. And yeah, I don't know. Like Taylor said, I could go on for hours about this stuff because I love it, and I'm so pumped up about this, and so grateful for Michael and the staff at the Maverick and everyone else who has helped me on my path. So thank you.
Really proud of you, John. Thank you very, very much. All right, Dave. Here it is. We got some notes. That's really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
Dave, I'm really, really excited that you're here today, and I'm really, really grateful. I remember sitting across from you on our first day I remember telling you about the program and about the kinds of expectations that we sort of were thinking, you know, in terms of consensus. We've seen this benefit, this benefit. We're not sure what'll happen for you, but everyone else around the table was sitting like, yeah, then that's good. I'm getting these benefits. And I remember seeing the pain in your eyes and the look. I felt bad telling you about these benefits because I could see the pain and the suffering of you across from the table looking at me. And I'll never forget that week afterwards. So I'll give it to you, take it away. But I'm just so grateful you're here. Thank you very much, Dave.
Okay, my name's Dave Larson. I'm 57 years old. Okay, so my introduction to substance use began at a Black Sabbath concert at the age of 10. So it was like 45 years of hardcore drug use. And I remember coming into Maverick, they asked me, what was your top 3 drugs? And like Taylor, I was top 3, but I could have listed off the whole page. And it was just relentless. It was hardcore. I went full in and destroyed a lot of my life because of it. It was just like my lower power took control. And it took over my life, and I couldn't find any way out. It was harsh. And then so at 15, doctors, I was diagnosed when I was 15 with ankylosing spondylitis, form arthritis. It fuses your spine, and so they put me on methotrexate. It was a sulfur-based drug for cancer, but it just turned me yellow, and I had to be under 24-hour surveillance. I could die at any time. So I wasn't good. It wasn't doing anything for the pain, so they put me on methadone at 15. And I did that for years on and off, and I went up to like 120 mil, and then I was down in Vancouver, and I couldn't get any, so I went cold turkey off it. Almost died. I was raising 2 babies at the time by myself. And then well, long story short, after years of abuse, I've just had enough and couldn't do it anymore. Put myself in a detox for the first time. After that, Maverick was lucky enough to take me. I thank them. I thank everyone there, the support staff, Darlene, Jackson, Tracy, Jess, all my family, friends, and peer support workers. I couldn't have done it without them. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. And then, so 4 months in, 5 months, I wasn't sleeping at all. I had insomnia. I tried all the prescription drugs that, same stuff they prescribed Taylor, and none of it did anything. All the Seroquel, nothing. I still couldn't sleep. Finally, I heard about the program with Michael, and within a week or two, like my legs were, I shattered my legs. I fell 25 feet off a scaffolding and shattered both my legs. Compound fracture. My legs were just like flat skin. And so I was in the hospital here in Kamloops for 2 years. They put surgical steel on this side's all nuts and bolts. I was in there for 2 years. A week after I got out, I got a motor vehicle accident and shattered my leg again. And then after that, I got into Maverick, of course, and then I started using my legs would swell up every time it was below my heart. Every time I got out of bed or out of my recliner, my legs would swell up, and I could barely walk. I was in so much pain. Until I started the CBDA and the CBD oils, and within a couple weeks, my swelling was down like nothing. And I stopped taking it for a week or so, and the inflammation came right back. And so I went back on it, and it went away again. So the benefits of it is phenomenal, I gotta say. And then the THC oils, I was able to sleep, and now I'm sleeping regularly. Something I hadn't done like my whole life. And yeah, without the program, it's just, I know I wouldn't have made it. So I want to thank everyone at Maverick and Michael and everyone. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So what kind of catches me about hearing all of these different lived experiences is you can see that there's a great deal of variety in what each individual is sharing. And yet in our program, we use really the same program for everyone. And so what's really fascinating about this is you're hearing a consensus emerging from people who, by all accounts, have a very complicated history and past. And as a result of that, it often makes us feel as though we're powerless in this work, and that we just don't have enough of what we need to really affect change. But what we're learning about with medical cannabis is that perhaps there is a missing piece of the puzzle here, and that if we are able to bring medical cannabis into a recovery setting as a standard operating procedure, as something that we integrate into, obviously, when it's appropriate, and it wouldn't be appropriate for everyone, but for those that it is, the sooner we get to it, and the less barriers there are to accessing it, what a difference that could make. And so I'm just wondering if anybody would like to add any additional information about the importance of starting the treatment as early as possible. And I know that for some folks, they've gone through traditional recovery for a period of time. I just want to know, what would it have been like for you potentially if you had had access to medical cannabis much earlier in your recovery journey? Does anybody want to kind of take that topic on a little bit and chat a little bit about that? Because I know this is an experimental, brand new therapy, and it's barely available. But what would it be like if this type of thing was standard equipment, that was something offered as a regular part of recovery and as a menu of choices, one of the things that you would have not hidden away, tucked away somewhere, but really as part of the process? What if this was available more broadly to people? Should it be? Anybody want?
Yeah, sure. Oh, wrong one.
Are we good?
Is this good? I think it's on. Yeah, we're on. Oh, use this one. Okay. I just wanted to also point out what you were bringing up, because this ties into what you're saying here. You spoke about Austin as being his first time in recovery and treatment, and I don't think he's actually the only one. I as well, and there you go. And that's just something to look at right there. I actually avoided recovery and treatment because I believed all the broken bones, all the smashed teeth, all the pain that I've been through, you know, I needed that for that stability and that pain to kind of get through in recovery. And how many years of skipping across rock bottom, low-income housing, getting kicked out of all low-income housing, and then homeless, and then having like tents burnt down in town and roaming the streets here for years. You know, like how many years could I have taken off? I could have taken off a lot. And, you know, it was always like looking up, there's got to be a center that has this somewhere. There's got to be a center that allows that, you know? Like I had to actually sneak in THC vape, like, in my pocket to detox just to be able to make it in there. And I just said, oh no, like it's stored in my fat metabolites. I'll keep it'll keep showing up in my urine. Sorry, I don't have it, but like that, I needed that to get through it, and I also didn't give recovery or treatment a chance because I knew, like, if I'm not sleeping, if I'm not eating, and if I don't have any stability, like, how can I focus and engage in this or move on with life? But I just think it's amazing the fact that we got 4 of us here that have never ever went to a recovery center, a treatment center. We tried on our own for years and years and years using opiate replacement therapy or our own tools of just abstinence. But the thing is, with mixing this with recovery, having these acidic forms is just unreal. It's not just like having cannabis for harm reduction or high THC. Yes, that can work great, and recreational, there has its place. But bringing this acidic forms to it, like, I thought I was a connoisseur of cannabis growing up, in a grow up kind of deal. I thought I knew everything there was to know about it. And then when I met Michael, I realized I knew absolutely nothing, and I had to scrap everything I thought I knew about it. And it just changed my life, knowing, like, oh, these alive forms, the plant's pretty much active, it's alive, and you ingest it, and the bioavailability is so unreal, you just can't compete with it, and it's so different than normal THC or CBD that the average person is aware of. So, like, I just had to have some emphasis on that because of what you're doing is mind-blowing. All of us here, I know I am, and it's not just the CBDA and THCA that you bring to the table. Your clinical support, you as a person, it's so hard to beat Michael Koehn here, obviously, but that is a huge part of it, and you make sure we have that support and that it's an adjunctive therapy. It also goes along with our recovery, and it doesn't just go along, it enhances it, and it gives us, like I said, so many other, like, stability and so many other things that we're able to improve on and work on. And yeah, I just had to say that and point that out. It was because the chances of, like, 4 people, trying recovery for the first time out of, like, massive addiction in their life, and it working first time is not a very common thing. So I just had to give them props for that. All right.
Thank you.
Like, to your question, like, me being in the Maverick program and it being introduced to me, I was in it 5 months. I mean, I used cannabis beforehand, before going into the treatment, and then being without it, it was, I got to see some things, figure some things out, why wasn't I sleeping? But, I was happy for that wait because it made me, I got to learn the difference on how to use it compared to when, before, when I was drinking and using it, I'd be doing it just for, depression or something to do. There was no rhyme or reason for it, where now I actually have a purpose for it. It helps me, right? I'm able to, before the event, obviously on the ride down, I took some oil. You got to use it. Or else I'd probably be behind the couch right now. So, but yeah, no, it needs to be more available, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So I know we're kind of winding up the time here, and I just wanted to open up the floor one last time for anybody who had anything they wanted to add. And no pressure, but if there's one last comment you want to make sure that people know about or hear about, maybe for people that are currently struggling with addiction, families that are struggling, what would you say to them? What would your advice be to them? Anybody who'd like to do that? John?
It all comes down to your intention and your mindset, I think, because growing up, and how bad you want it. Growing up, I've used cannabis on and off for the better half of my life. And when I was using it again, I was using it in the pretense of, I'm just using it to get high. And as participating in this program, being surrounded by like-minded people, and of course, our Bud Buddha over there, I was starting to see it from a new light and a new perspective, a tool to be used and intent behind it. And it completely changed my relationship with it. I was able to use it as needed Instead of smoking a joint every hour, I started using the oils consistently, like recommended, but not forced. Because that's another thing that I love about this program is the tools are placed in front of you, and the rest is up to you. And that helps immensely. I was slowly starting to reduce the amount I was smoking to not at all for quite a while, and I just used the oils. I've reduced the amount of ADHD medication I've been taking. Like many others here, I got off Sublocade, opioid agonist therapy, so many other benefits. It all came down to my perspective, my mindset on it, and is this a tool or a pastime? Thank you.
Also, to answer your question as well, it would have saved me, if I had it right away when I came in, it would have saved me 4 months. I would have gotten sleep right away. Because I remember coming back after the first time using it, and I could have kissed you. I was so happy. That's it. Thanks.
I can add to that quickly. It would have been nice to have right away the flower part. The THC mostly, because of one thing, methamphetamine psychosis. That was for real when I came in. Like, I mean, for real. Like, I was hearing things and I was friggin', I thought staff was out to get me at first because they put me in the door beside there, and the door would open so much at night. I thought there's no way that door can go so many times at night. I thought they were screwing with me. I don't even want to get into the other stuff. I thought my room was bugged. Like, so much more stuff. And within time, it can go away. I was probably on the borderline of, but it did go away, right? But with cannabis, it friggin' helped, for sure. Like, I'd feel normal and good when I was medicated, and when I wasn't, it wasn't so good, right? So it does go away, you know? Give it time, it goes away. And today I still use THC and CBD and a CBD oil and a THC oil, and there's none of that anymore. And my life is good. It's good. So I just wanted to add to that, you know? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, well, we've kept everybody here, past our time, but we've thought it was important. So thank you so much to everyone here for attending our event today. Florriann, do you have something you'd like to say?
One more round of applause to all of you. Yeah, big standing ovations. Thank you. Thank you. Well, wow, what a afternoon, and I thank you so much for all coming again, and this, just hearing you just made this so, I'm never going to stop working. I just know it, because it's just, yeah. You're so honest, and you're sharing things just, yeah, thank you. I'm speechless, basically. We would like, I don't know how much time we have, Michael. I think we're kind of over time than what we promised. We got to get out of this joint, I know. Okay, well, there might be a few people with some questions. Are we okay to stick around a little bit if we have some time? If not, again, I do have that sheet of paper. We can write some questions down. I have cards here if you need to get a hold of us. We have a CanSolve connection up top there with some emails. You take a picture with your phone if you want to ask us questions specifically, because some of you might have come with some questions, and we are a place of education. We want to share what we can with you. So I do want to leave that open to let you know that we are very approachable, and we do want to answer your questions, but maybe we run out of time today, okay? But there are ways to get a hold of us. So first of all, I want to say that. I did want to mention one little thing. You might have noticed a book on that table. And that is because Taylor is an author, and he's in there. He wrote a chapter in that book. And Taylor, do you mind reading the title? he signed it for me, so it's mine. That's my book. But you can get it on Amazon, and it is, I've actually gone through it twice because it is very powerful. It is about recovery. There are stories in there on how to deal with recovery, and they're raw, they're real, they're genuine, and I'd like to use that book for my students, my nursing students in their community health program class. Do you want to speak to it for 5 seconds? Just what it is about?
Sure, yeah, this is Healing Mind, Body, Soul, Recovering from Trauma of Addiction, and it's a compilation of people's lived experience in all forms, and there's amazing stories in here, and you know, my 11 pages in here is called Living Proof of the Maverick Protocol, so yeah.
He name-dropped us. I love it. Well, I just want to thank all of our speakers for coming from far and wide, and especially those who've shared their stories. It's not always easy to tell the stories, and you're so brave and wonderful for sharing them. I want to thank all the research team and our collaborations, Mastermind Studios again. All of these parts are going to be on YouTube, and I know that there will be hundreds and hundreds of views and more. And so I do want to thank again Peter Cameron-Ingus, the owner and videographer, director, producer, and the charter member of both the Motion Pictures Production Association of B.C. and the Canadian Media Producers Association. Holy crow, you're pretty important. Thank you so much for helping us bring all of this together and for videotaping this, because it will be used. Forever Immortal, we will be using this stuff. So yeah, you've made a big difference there for access of information. Any last words? We're all good? Okay. Some of us might be sticking around a little bit, so if you need to talk, and thank
Let's give it up
so
for
much.
Florriann.
Oh yeah. Thank you. All right, so that's it. Be careful going up those stairs. Thank you.